A Long Island man is behind bars in a Caribbean prison.
Now, I had to plead guilty because I thought I was getting a deal, right? So I pled guilty. I'm approaching $200,000 with this. I don't know if they're going to give me 20 years. I don't know. When I was about 19, I started working for this company, and they produced conventions and trade shows. And both my parents are business owners, so I came from a business household. So it was right around the time of 9/11, you know? So I worked for them for about 6 months or 8 months, whatever it may be. 9/11 happened. And I wasn't like directly affected by 9/11 because I didn't know anybody in the towers, but we wanted to go home, you know, like it was kind of like that whole thing where you just want to be with your family, especially if you're from New York. It was a very weird time. So I leave the industry and I become a stockbroker and I do that whole thing. But I always wanted to get back into it. So I'm sitting years later, I'm sitting with one of my clients who is local. And I'm sitting at the table with him and we're talking and I'm doing really, really well. I have my own shop and I'm making like $300,000-400,000 a year. I'm doing really well. And I'm 25 years old. You know, life is grand, you know? And I'm sitting across the table from my clients and we're talking. And I said, I got to get out of this. I said, what do you mean? Where are you going? You're making close to $500,000 a year. You're leaving. Where are you going? You know, what are you doing? I said, I'm just not happy doing what I'm doing, you know? He said, well, what are you going to do? So I told him what I wanted to do doing a sex convention. So he said, what do you want to do it? I said, I want to do it in New York. He said, well, I can't do it in New York. He said, I have ties, business ties. He said, what if I see somebody? I said, well, if you see somebody at the show, he's at the show. You're investing in the show. So, you know? So he wrote me a check and he invested in the show. And I started doing sex conventions for the next 8-9 years.
What was it? How much was the check? What is it?
It was like $350,000.
Really?
Yeah.
He's a good friend. He's
Yeah,
a good
well,
guy.
yeah. I mean, he was a degenerate gambler. He loved to play. You know, he was that was the guy. So we did a bunch of shows. We did great. I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember when Tiger Woods and David Boreanaz and like all the big celebrities were having affairs with porn stars?
Yeah.
Okay. So that was in 2009-ish, right? So what I did was I called them all up and I was like, you have to come to my show. And I made TMZ and I made all this bullshit because all the scandal girls were there.
Right.
So we did sex conventions for a while and we did a tour. We did feature tours. I had porn chicks going on feature tours at strip clubs. We got really into it. So long story short, I got out of the industry because my first ex-wife at the time wasn't really crazy about it and this, that, and the other, as you can imagine. So I was in a really bad time in my life and I got like a 9-to-5 with, you know, Cablevision?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got a 9-to-5 with Cablevision, knocking on doors that, you know, people left Cablevision to go switch to Fios. So my job was to bring them back, you know? So it was the greatest job in the world. I worked 4 hours a day, made $150,000 a year. It was dynamite. But I'm a business guy, you know? So now me and my ex-wife are going through it and we get divorced. And at the time I just started vaping. So I would hang out in my friend's shop. He had like a lounge. It wasn't really like a shop where you go in and buy juice and leave. It was like a lounge with a pool table and a bar, and we would all hang out and just chill out, you know? So I was getting really close with him. And I was going through the divorce, so I kind of needed, you know, that time away, you know, because it was really tense at my house. So I was hanging out with him, and he calls me up one day, and my ex-wife moves out at the time, so we're splitting custody of the kids. And he calls me up one day, and he's like, I just bought this booth at this convention in Jersey. Could you help me? I've never done a show before. Could you just help me and come? I was like, hell yeah, I really want to see it anyway.
What kind of convention?
It was a vape convention.
Okay.
It was a vape convention.
Making sure, being clear.
Yeah, of course. And so I go to the vape convention. As soon as I walk in, I noticed they had no idea what they were doing. The mayor actually came in on the Saturday and stopped the convention because of indoor smoking. And it was a whole big thing. And I was like, I'm going to do a vape convention. So I didn't have...
Vaping, is that smoking? Inside, is that considered?
Indoor, they consider it 6 of one, half dozen of the other. That's how they consider it, which I don't, but they do. So I said, I'm going to do a vape convention, but the problem is I don't have a dime to my name. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent, and I have my laptop and my phone. That's what I got. But I'm determined. I'm a very determined person. So I called up, I thought to myself, where could I vape in the Northeast indoors where this would be okay? So I thought it about the 2 casinos in Connecticut, the Indian reservations in Connecticut. They're
Right.
huge casinos. So I called up one of them, Foxwoods, and I said, how much do you need to hold the hall for 30 days and go to contract? It's at $5,000. So I beg and borrow and come up with $5,000. And
That gives you 30 days to come up
it
with the
gives,
rest
right,
of the money.
right. So I start hammering the phones with a friend of mine. She was doing me a favor and helping me out. And I get my first big sponsor. And it was a big distribution, consumer-facing distribution company. It was like the Amazon of vape in the Northeast. They were called Giant Vapes. So now that I had Giant Vapes, my company had kind of legitimacy because everybody knew them in the area. So now that I had Giant Vapes, everybody started latching on to the idea.
Right.
And our first show goes off, and we have 17,000 people walking through the door, 18,000 people walking through the door in a weekend. It was one of the most successful shows in the country. So we do it for 7 years or so, and COVID happens. And now we're doing shows for 20, 25,000 people all over the country. And we immediately get shut down because COVID happens. It was 2 weeks before my Northeast show. And now I'm stuck because I don't know what I'm going to do, because if you can't do conventions, you can't do live events, you can't,
Yeah, you've got all the things kind of interconnected, right?
So I said, what am I going to do? So I'm actually, towards the end of COVID, I start doing, those online poker clubs. I start doing that, and that kind of got me through COVID.
I was gonna say, I have a buddy who literally during COVID made a fortune doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I was making a living. I was, supporting my family with it. So I'm walking around and I'm talking to one of my buddies, and I said, what if I do a show, but not a convention? Take 20 buyers, like people who own distros and smoke shops and stuff like that, and 20 vendors or so who manufacture goods, and go to a really cool resort in the Caribbean, an all-inclusive resort, and have one-on-one meetings and party and hang out and drink and smoke and just chill out for a week and make money. That's a great idea. Now, I don't know if you know this, but towards the end of COVID, or during COVID, the vape industry and the cannabis industry kind of came together, and it became counterculture. It didn't become the vape industry or the smoke industry. It just kind of became counterculture, like Spencer's. That's what it became. And It was mainstream because cannabis was getting legal, and they had all these alternate cannabis products like Delta 8 and whatnot. So we did 7 of them, and they were huge successes. Like, really,
How many people are coming to these things?
it was only 20 buyers, 20 vendors. We had like 60 or so rooms at the at the resorts, but it was all the people that counted. It was the guy who owned the distro who distributed to 1,000 stores, and it was the guy who owned chains of 20, 30, 40, 50 stores. So, my manufacturers would sell, they got in front of the people that really mattered. That's what the point of it was.
What are people paying to come to the show?
10,000 a clip.
Okay.
10,000 a vendor. The buyers were free. The vendors were 10,000 a person.
Okay.
And it was 2 representatives from each company. So not only were they going on a 5-star vacation, but they
You
were
can write it off.
They were writing it
And
off.
you may end up having an amazing connection with somebody.
They
with a buyer.
they all wrote a couple $100,000 in business every time they went, because you were bringing business to a social environment. It was really cool, I mean, you were having a one-on-one 15, 20-minute meeting, but at the same time, you were going to dinner and you were partying in the pool and you were drinking with these people. So it all kind of meshed together.
How often are you having these?
Once every 2-3 months. We were doing a bunch of them, yeah. So our 7th one, we did DR, we did Mexico, we did Jamaica. Our 7th one was coming around. We were going to DR again. And
What?
Dominican Republic. We were going to DR again.
And DR again.
I'm sorry.
I thought you said Oregon.
No, it was all the Caribbean. So we were going to DR, and we chose this resort called Margaritaville. Margaritaville.
Yeah.
So we went to Margaritaville, and I introduced my vendors to a shipping company. Now, again, you have to keep in mind, I do not I do not manufacture anything. All I am is an event producer at the end of the day. I could be producing, gum conventions. It doesn't matter. I'm just an event producer, candy convention. It doesn't matter. So I introduce, even though I've been in the vape industry for 10 years. So I introduce my vendors to the shipping company who happens to have an office in Miami and an office in DR. So I said, just deal with that, So now all the vendors were going to ship their samples, promo items, hats, T-shirts, whatever it is they're sending to give to the buyers to their office in Miami. The office was going to palletize it, put it in one big pallet, and then ship it over to DR, go through customs, go through the whole thing.
And you've done this before?
This was the first time I was introducing the shipping company for convenience, but they always brought samples and hats and stuff in their luggage,
Right, they just ship it, right.
Right, no problems, It's not a lot of stuff. It was just a little from everybody. So it's 17 vendors that have stuff in this pallet, right? So they call me at the resort to go sign for it. Now, 17 vendors aren't going to go sign for one pallet. So I, as the group admin, are going to sign for the pallet. Now, again, keep in mind, I didn't ship a box. I didn't pack a box. I know nothing about what's in them. I just told them, don't ship anything illegal to DR. Just ship, if you're in the business of Delta 8 or cannabis or whatever it is that's legal in the United States, just ship packaging because the buyers aren't going to smoke or ingest anyway. Just ship the packaging because that's all you really need in promo stuff. So I go to sign for the pallet, and 20 Dominican DEA agents are pointing machine guns at my head.
Okay.
Yeah.
U.S.
No, Dominican DEA. They were called DNCD, but yeah,
their version of the DEA,
right. And they're pointing machine guns at my head. Now, keep in mind, this went through customs on both sides. I don't speak the language. I have no idea what's going on. Zero. I'm signing for a package.
Right.
Like that's what I'm doing. And they arrest me, and they bring me to Santo Domingo, which is 3 hours away from Punta Cana, where the resort was.
Did they do the whole get on the ground?
Yeah,
the whole thing. Okay.
I had a couple buddies with me who were helping me, pack the.
They put them on the ground.
They put them on the ground, but they only took me.
Okay.
Yeah. So we take a ride from Punta Cana to Santo Domingo, which is like 3 hours away. So they arrest me in Punta Cana and they bring me to Santo Domingo. Why, I don't know. But they said it was because the pallet came into Santo Domingo. But I was technically arrested in Punta Cana. So I should have been in Punta Cana. I shouldn't have been in Santo Domingo 3 hours away. Whatever.
Well, I mean, that's how it works kind of in the U.S. Like the jurisdiction you have to kind of be housed in the jurisdiction you're arrested.
Never been in
but I was going to say that's part of like the Constitution says you can't shop jurisdictions. But
right.
Anyway, that may not be the way they do it there.
Listen, it is what it is. So we go to Santo Domingo, and I get put in this like holding, I guess, facility of the DNCD, which is the Drug Enforcement Agency. So again, I don't speak the language, so I'm trying to figure out what exactly is going on with this whole thing. So we go to the next morning. My wife at the time has family friends that are Dominican, and they are related to this lawyer in Dominican Republic. So it kind of automatically becomes he's my lawyer now.
Right.
So the district attorney, the prosecutor who arrested me, tells them to meet him at his office in Santo Domingo. So they put me in a car, and we all go to the district attorney's office in Santo Domingo. So I'm sitting there with my wife at the time, and my travel agent, and my lawyer, who I never met before, but he's sitting in the next desk with the prosecutor.
Is he like a criminal lawyer, or is he like a real estate lawyer?
They told me he was a criminal lawyer. All right, so I don't know. Again, okay. I don't know at this point. He doesn't speak Spanish. He doesn't speak English either.
Oh,
so
that's good. That's a good situation.
Right, exactly. So we're sitting there, and we don't know what the hell's going on. But after the meeting, we get like 2 minutes to kind of talk to him. We have a translator. We're trying to figure out what's going on. And they say that he asked the prosecutor asked my attorney for $140,000, and this all goes away. I didn't have $140,000 at the time, or at least liquid. I didn't have it. And my lawyer basically tells him, go fuck off, and I'll see you in court.
Right.
So in the Dominican Republic, I don't know if you know this, but you're supposed to see a judge 2 days after your arrest, within 2 days after your arrest. So they bring me to this, I guess, Rikers Island. You know what Rikers Island is?
Yeah.
So they bring me to this, like, Rikers Island, which is like a temporary facility until you see a judge or until something happens. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm hysterical. I don't know what's going on. Number one, I've never been in jail. Number two, I've never been arrested. So I don't know what's going on. I still don't know what I'm being charged with. So I go to this thing and I'm thinking I'm going to be there for a day tops because I'm going to see a judge. I got arrested yesterday. I have to go see a judge by tomorrow, maybe the next day max. So I'm going to get out, I'm going to get bail or he's going to dismiss it and I'm going to get out. And that's what it is. So we end up going, I'm in this jail, this temporary jail, and I'm really uncomfortable. I don't have clothes. I don't have anything. And I can't communicate with anybody because nobody speaks the language. So now I go to court 2 days later, and the court system or my lawyer or somebody screwed up and don't have a translator for me. So they postpone it for another week. So now I'm going to be there for 9 days. And I thought that was the end of the world. I mean, that was the end of the world, I want to go home. I want to see my kids, this is not where I'm supposed to be. So I start freaking out and they let my lawyer come see me and they let my wife at the time come see me. And we go through that whole thing. So 9 days rolls around and my ex-wife at the time ends up going back to New York. So it's just me and my lawyer now. And there was this guard there. He was really nice. And he was being paid by my lawyer to be nice to me or to watch me or whatever it may be. And I haven't heard from the embassy yet. My ex-wife called him, but I haven't heard from the embassy yet. So I don't know what's going on with that. So we finally get my lawyer gets a translator and we have a lawyer and now we have the court date, right? So we're going to court. I'm going home, right? You would think I'm going home. I mean,
I'm thinking you don't.
I thought I was going home.
Right.
So I get to court and they say you have to stay in jail for 2 months, right? While we figure this whole thing out. And I am bawling my eyes out at this point. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I want to go home to my kids. I'm in a third world country. I don't know what's I find out at this time that I'm being charged with international narcotics trafficking. That's my charge. And international, and I'm thinking in the back of my head, international, that's big, that's like
serious. That sounds serious.
Right. That's not right. That sounds like a problem. But my lawyer is telling me 2 months you're going home. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. We're good.
Hey, bro, you can't even arrange for a translator to be here.
Right.
I'm not feeling real good about anything you say at this point.
Right. But now when I get to court, when they sentence me to the 2 months, I see all these cameras there, and I don't know if they're for me or for another defendant or whatever it may be. But later on that day, I'm sitting in the jail, and I see my attorney on the television in jail blaming the prosecutor for planting ecstasy in the palate. I'm like, holy shit. I mean, first of all, nobody has, half my vendors are, they're like ex-con, they all went sober, they all went straight. That's how the cannabis and vape industry
I was going to say the cannabis industry, we've had several guys on that were selling and smuggling, and now they have legitimate businesses. They all went legit since they were already in the industry when it was illegal. Once it became legal, it was easy for them to convert.
So that's what happened. So I was like, none of them do X. That's not what it is. So he goes on the news and says the prosecutor planted X in the boxes and this, that, and the other. Now that can't be good for me. Now he's accusing a prosecutor of planting drugs in my shipment. That can't be good for me on any front. So now I'm looking at 2 months, you know? So my lawyer's telling me, because it's in Santo Domingo, it's close of him to come visit me, and he's going to try to keep me in Santo Domingo and not bring me to a long-term facility for as long as humanly possible. Well, wouldn't you know it, 2 weeks later, now I'm crying every day. You know, I'm upset.
You're
Like,
clearly not. You're not cut out for this.
right. I'm more of a Ritz Carlton type of guy. You know, like, and so 2 weeks later, my name gets called to be transferred to like a real jail, like a real prison. And I'm freaking the fuck out. I'm like, what's going to happen? They're like, don't worry, your case doesn't get postponed or anything. It's just part of the process, right? So we take this ride on this bus to like a real prison. It was called Ohio 20. And again, I don't know what's going on. So I get off the bus and they start like an intake, kind of.
Yeah.
So they start an intake, and this guy, so in Dominican Republic, they're ranked by like stripes on the collar. So a regular guard is like just starting, a rookie is 1 stripe. A regular guard is 2 stripes. A supervisor is 3 stripes. A sub-director of the prison is 4 stripes. And a director is 5 stripes. So they tell me that this 4-stripe guy, the sub-director, is going to come handle me. Now, I was different than anybody, so I got a little more attention than most people would. So this guy comes in.
You're a high price. I mean, you're a high profile American who's been on the news multiple times.
I'm the only one.
Okay.
I'm the only American.
How many people are in this prison or this facility?
800. There's 800 prisoners.
Okay.
It's on the smaller side of what's there. So there's 800 prisoners in this one, and this guy's coming to come see me and kind of show me what's going on, or the best to his knowledge. So not only does this guy Montero come see me, but he brings one of the prisoners who speak English.
Okay.
He got deported from the U.S., but he did 14 years in the U.S., but he speaks English, so at least we'll get somewhere at this point, right? So he tells me that before I go into this guy's cell, I have to go into observation for 2 weeks. And that's just how the system works. I have to go into observation with like 30, 20, 25 people in one room, and they see how I am, and then I could go into general population. But the observation room was kind of like in the same general area as like the hole,
Right.
would be considered. So that was a little rough. So he put me in this maximum security room. And there was one guy who spoke English there too. But he was a real scumbag. We'll learn.
Right.
We'll learn. And he was doing a bunch of years also. So I go there, and now keep in mind, it's 3 hours away from Santo Domingo where my lawyer is, and they don't have apps where you could transfer money to my commissary. So somebody has to come to the jail to put money in my commissary so I could buy anything. Now, I'm not eating because, number one, I don't eat the food, and I'm too upset to eat. So I'm already starting to lose weight. When I got arrested, I was 323 pounds. I don't know if you saw the thing. Yeah. I don't know. You saw the CBS thing last night. They had my mugshot.
Yeah.
I was significantly bigger than I am now. I was 323 pounds. Now I'm
I
219.
didn't realize you were that big.
Yeah. I was ginormous. So I'm starting not to eat, and because of nerves, because of anxiety, because of everything, I'm starting to lose a little weight, but that's okay. I could afford to lose weight at this point, So I go into this thing, and we gather that the only way to get me money is by somebody sending Western Union to somebody in the jail, and then somebody in the jail, my friend, somebody in the jail's family would have to come bring it to the jail to go in my commissary. Because again, there's no apps around. It's third world. So I do this, and my mother or my wife at the time send money, but I'm basically sending money blind to somebody I met a few times, so I don't know if I'm going to get it.
An inmate? Some inmate.
Yeah, some
inmate says, yeah, send it to my wife and she'll take care of it.
Right. That's basically how it went.
Yeah.
So that became a whole thing. But I learned that they have Oreos and they have chips and they have like cup noodles. So at least I could get something.
Yeah.
Because I'm not eating anything they're bringing me in their food. And I also learned that they have like a premium meal service that you could buy at the commissary every day. They have lunch. So let me try that because I'm not eating the food that they're giving me.
What is the food that they're provide? They're just garbage.
Not only is it garbage, but it's made in filth.
Okay.
So like there's cockroaches and rats and everything like that. So it's like, I've never been in an American prison. You have, I'm assuming you have. So I would have to say jail food's bad, but it's associated with your country. But this is jail food for me when I've never been in prison, but it's not associated with my country. So even if it was a shitty burger, at least it was a burger. You understand what I'm saying? This is rice and beans when I don't eat rice and beans on the outside to begin with, but this was the shitty version of rice and beans, you know? So I'm not eating anything there. And now I'm living off of cookies and ramen and whatever there was at the commissary. So that at least I have something. And the guy ends up taking the majority of the money I send him and just stealing it, right?
I mean, is he telling you he's going to take the money?
No,
or is he
he's
just
not
saying,
telling me. He's just saying this is.
They sent $200,
right?
But your family's saying we sent $400,
right. And not only that, the conversion rate, and you got to pay somebody to go get the money and bring the money to the prison, and this, that, and the other. So that's where we are. So I go to Montero, and I tell him, put me in general population. I need to at least get outside and have, some sort of like, I need air. Because I was walking, as much as they would let me walk in the first prison, I would walk because it was kind of clearing my head. It was my only time to kind of think to myself.
Right.
And I knew that in the main area in general population, people were getting phones. There were legal phones, but there were phones being snuck in by guards or whatever it may be. So I knew that at bare minimum, I would be able to buy a phone in general population. So that he said, all right. He said, go into general population. And he puts me with this guy, Roy, who he's going to basically carry us out through the end of the story because he was my only, even though he was a career criminal, he was my only kind of salvation or way I would be able to communicate with everybody. He would kind of show me the ropes.
Right.
He was told by Montero, and he worked in the prison. So he was like, he did food service and he shined people's shoes, and, like the guards' shoes. So he kind of knew the ins and outs. And he was there for 4 years at the time or 3 years at the time. So he would show me the ropes. So I moved to Roy's room. Now, there are 4 buildings in general population, and building 3 was where Roy was. But I learned later that building 3 was the worst building because, it was like the building for bad kids, but they had to put me there because Roy was there, and Roy didn't want to move, so I had to go there. So I go to, they offered to put me in maximum security, which was in one of the buildings, but in maximum security, you can't really go outside. But I would be safe and protected, but I didn't want to do that because I wanted to go outside and I wanted a phone. So I said, no, put me in Roy's room, and I wanted somebody that spoke English. Mm-hmm. So I get to Roy's cell, and the buildings are very third world, very third world. There's cockroaches everywhere, and it's just concrete, but it's dirty and old. Well, the story behind it is the U.S. gave the DR several $100 million to reform and update this prison. So the guy who appropriated these funds stole these funds.
Right.
And actually was in this prison also for a short amount of time. So it was very third world. They didn't have any water. They didn't have running water for 10 minutes a day. They only had running water. They would turn it on, and Jesus. If you didn't shower with the Dominicans, the 40 Dominicans, on your floor, you had to preserve water for later to take like a bird bath, like with gallons,
right. I've been using Mando's whole body deodorant, and let me tell you, you can use it anywhere. Pits, balls, thighs, and even your feet. Mando's powered by mandelic acid. so it stops odor before it even starts. It blocks odor all day. I'm talking 72 hours. I love the scents too. My favorite is bourbon leather. It smells amazing. You can choose from other fresh options like Cloverwood and Mount Fuji. And the best part, no baking soda, no parabens, just clean, safe deodorant for your whole body. I've added Mando to my daily routine, and honestly, I feel fresher and more confident. It works way better than just showering alone. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid deodorant stick, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. You'll get 40% off your starter pack if you use code COX at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Once again, that's shopmando.com and use the promo code COX.
So I chose to find gallons of water, empty gallons, and I would shower later. You know, good.
That's the picture with all the empty gallons of, or like milk jugs.
Well,
they look like milk jugs.
Yeah, they were like gallons or half gallons or buckets. But I couldn't. But not only you couldn't shower, you had to preserve water to flush down the toilet because the toilets weren't flushing. They had no running water. I mean, they put on the water for 5 or 7 minutes at 6:30 in the morning, and then at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, that's what you would get. So, and water wasn't every day. There was every 2 weeks the water system would go out, so we didn't have water for days sometimes. So I knew that now I had I had a shower by myself. So we would gather water and we would do that whole thing. So I figured that out. My friend Roy got me a phone. Figured that out. Roy was nice to me, so he said he was round number 2 of send my sister money. I'll get it to whoever we need to get it to.
Right.
So there was 2 economies in the prison. There was the illegal economy, right? And there was the legal economy, which was the commissary. So I needed money in both economies because I had to buy my phone. I started smoking because they didn't have any vapes, so I started buying cigarettes. And there was the legal economy with the commissary, and if I didn't get money deposited in the jail, I needed to find out how to get tickets because they didn't have cash, they had tickets. So every Tuesday, whoever's family member would go to the prison on Sunday, visit you, put money in your commissary, and then on Tuesday they would hand out the tickets. So I had to find out how to get tickets. So subsequently, the people who sold drugs and the people who sold phones and cigarettes, they had tickets because they were vendors, right? So the smart thing was to find one drug dealer, one vendor, having a relationship with him, get him the money, and on Tuesday, whatever money I didn't spend on cigarettes and my phone or buying drugs for doing favors for me, I would have left over so I could buy food at the commissary. Makes every sense. Everything seems simple, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when I first got to general population, I don't know if you saw the picture, everybody carried around these big machetes. You saw those? I'll show you a picture. Okay. And there were these machetes that they would break up the beds, the bunk beds, and they would file them down and make machetes, and that's what they would walk around with. And everybody's doing drugs and this, that, and the other, and buying them from. They would have two ways of smuggling these drugs in. There was one, crooked guards, and 2, they would throw these like wrapped balls over a fence, like really, really like down and dirty type of thing, and they would fish them with like fishing, like little string, and they would fish them and bring them in the building. So at least I had cigarettes and a phone. I could call my kids, I could call my wife at the time, and I called my mother and a few friends. So I got that, and now everybody was kind of fascinated with me because I was the American, but everybody also thought I was rich. No, I was not. I always had a decent living and a good business. I supported my household, but by no means was I wealthy, but right. To Dominicans, I was the wealthy gringo. That's right. What it was. So not only was everything more expensive to me, but everybody was going to try to take advantage. You know, they picked up something from me off the floor. I had to buy them, you know, I had to buy them drugs, or I had to give them something. You know, nothing was free, you know?
Yeah.
And now I'm scared half to death because I don't speak the language, and the only person that I could really communicate is Roy, and Roy works most of the day, so I have to figure out how I'm going to communicate with these people. So I have my phone now, so I have Google Translate. But the problem with Google Translate is 60% of the inmates don't read or write. So now I'm really screwed, you know, like,
Right. They're probably not speaking proper Spanish anyway.
No, it's very slang. It's very slang Spanish. I'm trying to pick up some sort of Spanish, you know, very basics. So as I'm learning, I'm really keeping to myself, and I have my phone, so I'm on my phone a lot. I'm just playing on my phone a lot, you know, but they were illegal phones. So now every time a cop would come in the building, one guard was assigned to each building every day, but every time a guard would come in the building, the building had, like, they had calls. You know, they would scream out Leo if they came in the building to put everything away or hide the drugs or you know, put the phones away or whatever it may be. So I would have to find somebody that would take my phone, because if they caught you with a phone or drugs, you were going to the hole.
Right.
And that I didn't want that to happen, because this was already bad. So I would imagine, I don't even know what the hole was all about.
Right.
And the hole is not like anything you did wrong, you went to the hole. But the guy who has a phone should be treated differently than the guy who just stabbed somebody. But that wasn't the case.
Right.
You know, so they were all in one spot. Just like when I was in the cell, I was sharing a cell with two guys convicted of murder doing 30 years. So there was no separation.
Right.
But what you also have to understand is that 60% of the inmates are preventative. They're pre-trial. So 60% of these people
Haven't been convicted of anything.
haven't been convicted of anything, but they're all criminals, you know? So now I'm sitting waiting for my 2 months, to come up. I have like a month left. I'm trying to learn what was going on. I'm losing weight like crazy because I'm not eating. I'm living off of cookies and potato chips. And my lawyer comes, visits me once. And at this time, my marriage is going through some trouble. Right?
You think?
Right. My marriage is going through some trouble. And it seems like my wife at the time is looking for a way to get out.
Right.
You know? So she even starts limiting how much we're talking. And her stepfather, she was foreign, so she had a adopted family. That's a whole nother story. A adopted family in the United States. And my father-in-law starts talking to me and basically tells me that my wife at the time really didn't want to talk to me much. And she's like starting to gather my assets. She's starting to take money out of my bank, my business account. She knew all my PIN numbers and stuff like that. So she's starting to hoard my money, starting to sell my, stuff in my office, and she's starting to sell furniture, and she's starting to kind of like transition to move out of the situation. So I get a call from my father-in-law one day, and in my ex-wife's family, it's like a hierarchy. So they say jump, you say how high. No matter, it doesn't. I'm 40 years old. I'm 40 some odd years old, 42 years old at the time, and that's just how it worked. They had 4 or 5 kids, and you didn't breathe if you didn't ask them. That's just how it was. It was very strange. So now what you have to remember is my lawyer is their family friend. So whether or not me and my wife stay together, I have to deal with them because they're my link to my attorney.
Right.
And so now my father-in-law is telling me that my lawyer is only going to speak to me through them. And
What?
yeah.
This is my lawyer.
Right. But I don't have any out on this because I don't have another lawyer. My mother just got diagnosed with cancer the day the day after I got arrested. And I'm trying to keep, like not involve her as much, even though she's calling. I'm speaking to her every day. I'm crying to her, and she's calling them, but that's kind of how it was. So I sold my mother on the idea, all right, just let them handle it type of thing. What are we going to do if they don't, So my father-in-law calls me up one day and he starts yelling and screaming at me. So supposedly my ex-wife hacks into my social media and sees things that she shouldn't have, right?
Okay.
And now we're getting divorced.
Right.
Okay. And we're not speaking anymore. Me and my wife are not speaking anymore. My father-in-law tells me this. We're not speaking anymore. And so now I'm talking to my father-in-law who hates me, right? That's the only way I could talk to my lawyer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my father-in-law hates me. I don't know the language. He's my only link to this, but he made a promise to my mother that he will stay involved. He was doing me a favor and staying involved to make sure I get home. So things start getting really tense really quick, right? My phone gets stolen and held for ransom. And every day it's just another thing with the inmates, with my father-in-law. And I am just hyper anxious at all times at this point. I don't know what to do. My lawyer comes, visits me, and now I have Roy. So now I have Roy who speaks English and Spanish. So at least I have somebody kind of on my side that could kind of translate. So I go up to my lawyer when he comes to visit me finally, and I say, my father-in-law is telling me I can't speak to you and I can't have any direct communication with you. And that makes me feel really uncomfortable because me and my soon-to-be ex are going through a divorce. So could we please figure that out? Don't worry about it. Message me directly. We're good. Okay. So I message him directly, and who do I get messages from but my father-in-law? Well, Johnny called his cousin, his niece, and they were on the phone, and he said that you were messaging him directly, and you can't do that. So I got to the end of my rope. I'm at the end of my rope now, and I don't know what to do. So we have to figure this all out. So I start calling other lawyers. And remember the guard I told you about that was really nice to me in the first jail? He told me about this one lawyer, Santana, that fixes these problems, Right. So I message Santana on WhatsApp through through translation. And Santana says that, now I sent the first lawyer already at this point, I sent him 30 grand. My mother borrowed money. I had a little bit of money that my wife allowed me to take, and sends him 30 grand. Now, I don't know, to this day, I don't know if my father-in-law got a piece of that. I don't know how much got to the lawyer. I don't know anything. But that lawyer also was very politically motivated, I come to find out. And that's why he went on the news and that whole thing. So I'm talking to this guy, Santana, over the next week, and he's doing his due diligence. And he said, Mike, 50 grand, I'll get you out. I'll get you out on your next court appearance. What the fuck am I getting 50 grand? I'm not, right. I have no money. My ex-wife isn't going to give me anything. My mother doesn't have any money. She's dealing with cancer. What am I going to do? So I have my phone. So I start calling people to see if I could raise money. I would think the vendors that had stuff in the pallet, they should contribute, right?
Right. You would think they would feel bad, like, hey, I think we obviously got this guy into a jam.
Right. But they're not picking up my calls.
Right.
They're not answering. And these are people that I did business with for 10 years.
Because they're thinking they're going to get in trouble.
Well, not only are they thinking that they're going to get in trouble, but they're like, I have my own life. This guy's in jail. Well, fuck him.
Right.
But some of these people are at my wedding. Like
Right.
this wasn't, I traveled the world with these people for 10 years. This was my family, my extended family, that we went to each other's houses and we hung out and we did the whole thing together. So I would think that, each one at bare minimum would say, here's $5,000, get the fuck out,
Right.
but they weren't picking up my calls. So my mother had to kind of beg and borrow from people that she knew. And one day, my father-in-law calls me up and starts a big argument with me. And at this point, I have Santana on deck. He's
Right.
ready to go. And something just snaps in my head. And I start fighting back with my father-in-law. Because at this point, I'm a punching bag for him because
Yeah.
I'm scared. But now I have a backup, so let me fight back a little
Right.
bit. So I fight back, and I basically said, look, I don't want to have anything to do with you. Leave me alone. I'll leave you alone. Whatever. It's fine. You don't want to talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. I'm good, So I said, I'm getting rid of Johnny because this is not working. Johnny's first lawyer.
Yeah.
So for some miracle of God, we get the $50,000 to send to Santana. My mother borrows. She asks friends, and she asks all these different people, and we've raised the $50,000 for Santana. Now, getting Santana money is also a problem because I don't know if you ever wired to DR, but when you wire to DR, it's not instant like now. It's not overnight. It's 2 weeks.
Right.
So we're sending Western Unions to this guy Santana. But you can't send $50,000 in a Western Union, so you have to have 30 people send $1,000 each,
Yeah.
So my mother's trying to find different people to send wires, and we're going, it's insane what's happening. So we finally get Santana the money. Now my mother also made a trip to DR and the whole thing. So my court date's coming up, and I'm like, this is awesome. I'm about to go home. It's been 2 months and change. I'm going home, So I get to court. And now when you go to court from Ohio, you get a bus, right? But in America, that bus that transports you is told that they have to be on, it's taking extra measures. I'm assuming, again, I've never been in jail in America. It's taking extra measures that you're on time and you're ready for court. Well, it's not like that in DR. It's whenever the bus gets there, it gets there. And if you're late for court, you have to postpone, and that's just what it is.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Is this a regular bus? Like this isn't like a transport owned by the DR?
No, it's a transport, but again, the Santo Domingo is 2 hours away by bus. There's a lot of traffic, and sometimes it runs late. That's
Right.
what it is.
Okay.
So in the meantime, the embassy comes to see me while I'm waiting for this first court date. The embassy comes to see me, and I see the embassy, and I'm so relieved to see the embassy because they speak English, and I see an American, say they bring an American who works for the embassy, and they kind of bring this intermediary. And my intermediary was this guy named Jose. And he spoke English, but he was Dominican. I think he was dual citizen. And they basically explain, I'm crying to this guy, and I'm telling him, please help me. This is the story. It's very apparent I wasn't trafficking drugs. I was holding an event. I've done these before. Please help me. We can't do anything.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We can't do a thing. They bring me this little hotel soaps, and they bring me deodorant. And I said, take your soap and shove it up your ass, man. I can buy my own soap.
Right.
I need your help, So I find out that the embassy can't do anything, and now I'm waiting for this guy Santana to pay somebody to get me out.
Right.
So we get to the court. Santana's already gone. My bus is 2 hours late to court, and my next court date was postponed for want to say right in mid-November. So now it's 2 months. So it's September, right, from when I got arrested. And now I'm here another 3 months. And I am beside myself. Like, I'm beside myself. I'm hysterical. I don't know what to do. And my lawyer's not there, so I don't even know if somebody just stole $50,000 from me.
Right.
So I call my lawyer when I get back to my cell, and he tells me I didn't want that judge anyway. So I'm happy it was we made sure it was postponed.
Sounds good.
Sure.
Yeah. But I got to sit in prison.
Right.
Or,
I got to sit. Couldn't you get me bail? You know. So now I'm stuck for another 2 months. So my mother makes arrangements to come. Now, I'm an only child. My mother's fighting cancer, but my mother can't come to DR for an extended period of time until she finishes her chemo, right? So she starts making plans, when am I going to finish chemo and this, that, and the other. So I'm waiting. And in the interim, my mother contacts my father, who I haven't spoken to in years and years and years, and tells him the situation. So now we're just waiting. I'm starting to talk to my father again after years, and we're waiting. 2 days before, so Santana tells me, we have the deal. Everything's set. Next court date, you're going home. I paid the money. Everybody has their money. The district attorney has his money. The judge has her money. And you're going home. Very simple.
Okay.
Right? The case is going to be dismissed. 2 days before I go to prison, I get a call that Santana dies.
I fucking knew it. I was going to say, was this guy die? Does he get sick? Does he?
Yeah. He drops dead. So I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. Do I still have the deal?
Right.
Or do I still have the deal and I just got to go through the motions of going to court with somebody? Or do I not have the deal? Is my 50 grand gone? I had to beg and borrow to get the 50 grand. What am I going to do? So we go to court, and now we have to postpone it. But you would think that you postpone it for 2 weeks, tops. I get another lawyer, we could go through the motions, and then I could go home, right? So they don't postpone it for 2 weeks. They postpone it for 3 months. Now I'm in jail for Christmas.
Right.
I'm literally screaming at the judge at this point in jail. I'm screaming at the judge in court saying, I don't want to be here for Christmas. I did nothing wrong. I signed for a package that wasn't even mine, and I want to go home. Could we please move it closer? Those are the dates. So now I have to go to court January 15th. So again, we don't have any idea who's going to be my next lawyer or where the money's going to come from. But my mother starts talking to my father, and he runs a successful business, and he says, I'll free up 50 grand for you to get a lawyer. And we start interviewing lawyers. Now, during this time, my mother got special permission from the jail to come to the jail and visit me every day. She books a trip for 6 weeks to spend Christmas and New Year's, Thanksgiving with me, just so I have something. And now we have to find another lawyer. So it's good that she's there. So her friend's married to a Dominican who has a cousin in DR, in Santo Domingo, who's driving her around. She hires a translator. So she's paying money, all this money to people that she can't afford, number one, but she has to do it because she has to get me a lawyer and she has to come. She's not going to drive in DR, So she has a driver and she's getting me a lawyer and we're interviewing lawyers and we're doing the whole thing. And while this is happening, it was like the 4th or 5th day that she was there. I go upstairs and visit her and I see these guards and they're all dressed in black and you could see they're maximum security guards. And I've seen them before. They did maximum security. They were the people in charge of maximum security. And I didn't pay any mind to it because they were always there anyway. And I say hello to them, and they say, what's your name? I said, my name. And he goes, come with us. And they cuff me. What the fuck? What did I do? I said, I'm going to see my mother. Mm-hmm. So they cuff me. And while this is all happening, my mother and I are writing letters to everybody. We're trying to contact congressmen and people in politics and whoever we could contact, the news, whoever we could contact to shed some light on this, to help me get out, we're trying to contact. So they bring me to my cell, and there are 6 of them with me, and they're fully blacked out, and they mean business. These guys mean business. These aren't like a regular guard, you know. These guys are mean business. So they're tearing apart my cell. And they're at, where's the phone? Where's the phone? Where's the phone? So I knew that I always had to bring my phone. I had to hide my phone when I wasn't in my cell because, you know, just in case they said Leo, my phone had to be away and I had to leave it with somebody I trust. So I established a really good relationship with one of the drug dealers on the next floor up from me. So I brought it to him.
Right.
So my phone was in my room, so I was safe.
Right.
So they're tearing apart my room and they're asking me for the phone, but they can't find the phone. I said, I don't have a phone. There's no phone here. So they don't know what to do. And they bring me to the hole, but they don't put me in the hole. They put me in observation, the room that you're supposed to go to when you first get to the jail.
Right.
Because it's a little more mellow than the hole. So I find out that I'm there because one of the letters, you know, Chuck Schumer?
Yeah.
So I hear that one of the letters I wrote to Chuck Schumer or his office. And you would think that an American writing a letter from a prison that doesn't have a record or anything, you would think they would kind of keep that confidential. But supposedly that information got out to the prison, and the prison knew I had a phone because the email was sent to Chuck Schumer's office from my phone.
Oh, okay.
So they knew there was a phone, but they didn't know where it was because it wasn't in my room. So now I'm in observation. And I don't have a lawyer, and now they have one phone floating around there, but it's like an old Nokia, you know, that was the prison phone that we could kind of share.
Right.
So I could make 2 phone calls a day. You know, that's what I got. Or 3 phone calls a day. They weren't long phone calls. It wasn't my phone. So I'm calling my kids once, and I'm calling my mother and father twice because we have to figure out what's going on with my lawyer. So we get a couple lawyers to come to the jail. And there were these 2 lawyers that I was boiling it down to. One was this like Fifth Avenue type of lawyer who had an in-house, one of the partners spoke English. One of their clients were Pfizer. You know, they were a Fifth Avenue lawyer, very expensive, but it seemed like they knew what they were doing, right? And then there was this other lawyer who was younger, and he brought his friend who spoke English, who was an English teacher, but he was younger, but he understood my case.
Right.
He understood that it wasn't even real weed, number one. You know, it was like hemp. It was legal in my country. It went through customs. It was nothing. You know, it was nothing. It was insignificant.
Right.
So he understood that. So I liked him, but I knew he had the experience, you know? So my mother and father take it upon themselves to hire the Fifth Avenue lawyer because that's where they think I'm going to get the better defense. But I wasn't crazy about the Fifth Avenue lawyer because every time I would message him, it kind of felt like I was bothering him, you know? And he was like, and I was nervous. So I wanted to communicate with my lawyer, you know? So, and meanwhile, the other lawyer, the younger guy, he would talk to me all day. Are you okay? Could I bring you anything? You know, like that type of thing. But the other lawyer was like very reasonable in price. So I was like, let me continue to talk to him. If he wants a little money, I'll even get it for him, you know? So now I'm going through the motions with this Fifth Avenue lawyer, but I get introduced to this lady. So now I'm 3 lawyers in, 4 lawyers if you count the guy, the younger guy. I get introduced to this lady through an inmate that says she has the right connections, right. You know? And she tells me that for 10 or 12 grand, I could get out. You know, I could get out on my next appearance. But she doesn't want to argue my case. She wants to be in court so the judge sees her, but she doesn't want to argue my case. So I'm thinking about this too, right? Now, during this time, one of the letters that we wrote, that my father wrote, I actually wrote it. I find an email address for the president of Dominican Republic. And I write an email and I tell my father, send this email so it doesn't come from me.
Right.
So he sends it, and I'm out of, my lawyer pulls strings and gets me out of punishment area, gets me out of observation. I was there for 6 days. And I wake up one Sunday morning and they tell me that I have a visitor. My mother already went back. They tell me I have a visitor. I said, who the hell is visiting me on a Sunday? You know, it's not the embassy. They don't come on Sunday.
Right.
So I go upstairs and I see these 2 guys. They introduce themselves to me as colonels. They're colonels that are right under the president of Dominican Republic. They have my entire file.
Right.
But they don't speak English. But they have a phone, so I'm using Google Translate. So I tell them the rest of the story, and they say, we're going to see if we could help you. But thank God, thank God. Maybe you could help me. You understand what I'm going through.
And they say for $50,000.
No, they just say they're going to try to see what they can do. And they leave. I am never to hear from these people again. Never.
Okay.
Now I hear a couple different whispers about why that happened also, but I never hear from these people again. He's up for re-election. So I don't know if he's doing anything or not doing anything, but I'm getting nervous because I haven't heard from him. And I had my mother write an email to him and there was no correspondence. So now this lady tells my mother for 12 grand or whatever it is, she's getting me out of prison. So I said, we have 20,000 left in the fund because we gave the Fifth Avenue lawyer 30 and we had 50 and now we have an extra some money. So let's send this lady $10,000 so she can get me out. Right?
Right.
So we send this lady $10,000 and she tells me that she meets with the people she has to meet with, and it's not $10,000. It's another 30. And my father's frustrated. I'm frustrated. My mother's frustrated. We don't have another 30.
Right.
That's not happening.
Yeah, and it's a scam anyway.
And it's a fucking scam anyway. So we say, take the 10 that you have. You already have it. And let me know what you can do with that. So she comes back and she says, well, for the 10, we'll get you a deal where you can get out of jail, but you have to stay in the country and finish out a year. And then you'll have to sign. You can go back to your country and you have to come back once a month or once every 2 months to sign, kind of like a probation type of thing. So I said, if that's the way it has to be, that's the way it has to be. I mean, that's where we are. So meanwhile, the Fifth Avenue lawyer is representing me, and I have the other lawyer kind of on deck. I'm talking to him. We're friends at this point. I think I sent him like $1,000, just
right.
So he could kind of counsel me almost through this whole thing. So we get to court, and the Fifth Avenue lawyer is putting together this whole fucking dog and pony show strategy and tells me that he wants to postpone it another month so he could build his case more. So I'm close to a year now. I mean, like I'm getting up there, you know? And I don't like him to begin with.
Right.
So I tell him to go fuck himself. And I hire the other lawyer.
The kid.
The kid. And my next court date is not only the date that the lady is supposed to get me the deal, but it's also the date where they determine whether or not I'm going to trial, right?
Okay.
So it's a pretrial date. And I'm a year in. I'm a year into this thing. And we go to the court, and it's February. And I figure I'm getting out. I'm approaching. I'm approaching. Worst case scenario is I got a year, so I'm going to get out very soon, and we'll see what happens. So we get to court, and the kid's representing me, and he argues, but I think I have the deal in the bag because I got the lady standing right behind me,
right,
and we're good. And the judge says we're going to trial, but doesn't set a date for trial because that's not how it works in DR. You have to wait for a date for trial. We're going to trial. I look at the lady. What the fuck happened? They didn't want to do anything because you didn't give them extra money, this and the other.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So now the whole scam's falling. I tell her to go fuck herself, and now I got the kid. But do I want the kid representing me at trial? Because now it's getting really, really apparent to me that I'm facing 20 years in prison. That's what I'm facing. I'm charged with narcotics trafficking
for
a few vape pens. But it's not classified. It's not classified as that. I'm in the same category with people who are shipping cocaine powder from Colombia to DR. That's that's how I'm classified. So now I got to figure out what the hell's going on. But we find this translator who translated for me at this date, and we became friendly with him. He was a really nice guy. He did a lot of government work. And he said through a relationship of his, he knew this really famous criminal attorney. But I can afford a really famous criminal attorney because I'm over 150 into this, 180 into this. There's no more money. The well is dry, you know? Right. And my mother's a very emotional Italian woman, you know? My mother calls up the guy and gets on a phone call with him, and his daughter speaks English, so she's translating, and cries to him and says, I'll take the case pro bono. Just give me like $1,000 to $2,000 to get all the shit, you know, like everything I need to do. Just give me $2,000. I'll walk you through the whole case. I'll figure this out. And like if you were to Google this guy's name, this guy's on TV. He's representing a very high profile. He does murder cases. This is his wheelhouse. Right. You know, he's the Johnny Cochran of you know, you see this guy on TV. So I'm like, all right, cool. This guy's nice. He's going to help me get through it. He's going to even work with the young kid, and we're going to be good. So we start talking all this nonsense. And meanwhile, this guy, I forget how it happened, but this guy comes into the picture. His name was Jose, and he's a real used car salesman, like real used car salesman, scumbag type of guy. Right. And he starts pitching me another backdoor way to get out of this whole thing. But his pitch was, it's $30,000. You will get out. You will leave the country immediately. You will have to come back every 2 months, sign for 4 years. That's what it is. I met with the judge. Here's what it is. The judge is this. He knew the judge's names. He knew the prosecutor's names. He had access. He had more information than normal people would, you know? So I said, now that we got the famous lawyer, yeah, but that's not definite because he's straight. He's a straight arrow. He's going to represent me in court the Johnny Cochran way, but this guy is giving me an out. Mm-hmm. Let's come up with the $30,000. Yeah. So at this point, while this is all happening, there's a lot of violence in the jail. My phone's getting stolen. I'm getting extorted for money on a daily basis. But the one thing that the embassy did, right, was be the embassy. Now I'll explain that. So the embassy didn't do nothing. They didn't help me in any way, but they let off the impression to the jail and the guards and the inmates even that I was the American that was not to be touched.
Right.
So I could be extorted and I could be robbed, but as far as physical violence is concerned, I'm off limits. You know, that's kind of how the whole thing was.
I can be extorted,
right,
be stolen from.
right, but don't touch the American, right. So now there's all sorts of violent people are getting murdered on a weekly basis here. I'll give you a story. There was one guy, and he was doing 20. So he was doing 20, and we had these fans because the windows were open. It was 100 fucking degrees there, you know?
Right.
And the only thing you had was really a fan, and only some rooms had the fan. So he had a fan, and he had to get money from his cellmates, whatever it may be, to pay for the fan. So, and we're not talking about $1 million. We're talking about 2,000 pesos, which is $30, you know? Right. So they didn't pay him or whatever it may be, and they were jerking him around. And he formulates this plan where he's going to kill him. He's going to kill one of these guys. So he takes his machete, and one night after they close the gates at 10:30, everybody's in lockdown. They're in like another building, you know, where they sleep, the guards. And he pokes one of his cellmates to death. And then, because...
Perfectly reasonable.
Well, I mean, I would. And then the other cellmate tries to stop it, and he's poked him too. You know, they took 25 minutes to get to the cell to get this guy out of the cell with two bodies on his floor. I mean, that's kind of how it works.
That's the reaction time.
That's a reaction time. But if they hear that there's a phone in the room, they're there at 30 seconds, you know? So that's kind of what was going on a semi-weekly basis. And I'm scared shit. Like, I knew that I was kind of safe, but at the same time, I mean, these people, I'm sharing rooms with these people.
I was going to say, these are not exactly rule followers.
Right, exactly.
So they've been warned, but yeah.
Right, it didn't matter.
Does
right.
that really matter?
Right. So now I have, you know, in the legal point of now, I have my straight-laced Johnny Cochran attorney, right, who's helping me. I have the kid who's kind of consoling me. And I have this guy, Jose, who just came in the picture, who's telling me for 30 grand, he got the deal. And he's showing me proof that he has, that he has a deal. So I contact a few of my friends, and I contact this guy, and he was a buyer of mine. So he didn't have anything in the pallet, but he was a buyer of mine. He owns a distro, and he was a really, really great Indian guy and really great person, you know? And I got on the phone with him, and I cried to him, and I told him what was the deal. And my mother talks to him, and she cried. My mother's an Italian, she cries about everything. And she's crying to him, and he was like, I'll help you. So he gives me the $30,000. I'm getting out of jail. We just need to, yeah, I know. So I'm approaching $200,000 with this. That's just illegal. That's not the $200 that I'm going through every week in the commissary and with buying people drugs and doing the whole thing. So I'm over 200 into this, plus my mother's expenses of coming and doing the whole thing. So I get the 30. They tell me that they finally get me a court date for July 1st. So now I'm over a year.
Right.
June 22nd, I get arrested. July 1st of the next year is my court date. So it's my trial. I'm going to trial. This is going to end. Now, I'm scared because I'm facing 20 years and I don't know if this guy's full of shit. But there is a sense of relief, I guess you could call it, because during this whole time, I'm living in limbo. I don't know what's going on. I'm facing 20 years. I don't know what's going on.
Right.
So my court date's finally approaching, and we get to trial. Well, now in the Dominican Republic, there's no jury. There's 3 judges. So there's 1 guy and 2 women, right? And I'm thinking that I got the 2 women because I'm emotional. My mother's there. She has cancer. I got the emotional aspect of this, And the guy, even if it's 2 against 1 with the women, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm gonna get at least something decent, right?
Right.
So the prosecution calls 4 witnesses. They call 2 people that arrest me. They call a handler that handled the dog, the drug sniffing dog, and they call someone else. I forget who it was, but all four. They call the guy, the shipping company, the guy who owned the shipping company. All 4 witnesses testify to my story and basically say he didn't know what was going on.
Right.
He was completely caught off guard. He was hysterical when we arrested him. Even the dog handler said at the airport that intercepted the pallet basically said, we found the drugs, or we found the cannabis, but it was labeled in boxes like it was being sold at a store. He wasn't hiding it. This was not in Ziploc bags. This was being used for a meeting or something like that. So everybody testifies to me, and even the prosecutor basically makes his closing statements and says, look, please, the court, show mercy on him, give him whatever minimum it is, because he's not a drug trafficker. He gets it, Now, did that come from the crooked lawyer Jose? Did that come from the president? Where did that come from? Nobody knows. Or was it just genuine that they had compassion for the situation? So I didn't know, So they, we all argue and everything's okay. And it was spread over 2 days because trials they're not like trials here where, it's actually organized.
Right.
Trials there are 20 minutes. The whole thing, front to back, that's what it is, So, so we return after that, and we're wrapping things up, and they go into chambers and they're talking. I'm sitting there with my mother, and I'm sitting there with my lawyer, and I'm sitting there with the translator. And the translator kind of knows the situation because he's represented me a couple times, and I'm looking at him like, what do you think? And he was like, I'm pretty sure it's good, but I don't know. Now, I had to plead guilty because I thought I was getting a deal, right? So I pled guilty, right? I pled guilty. I said, yes, I did this, but unintentionally type of thing.
Right.
So I don't know if they're going to give me the probation deal. I don't know if they're going to give me 20 years. I don't know. It was the longest 15 minutes of my life that they're in chambers. So they come out, and the guy starts talking, and he says, I wanted to let you go today, but they don't. And points,
the 2 women?
The 2 women, right. They don't want to let you go. So I was like, oh, fuck. What not now? So he makes this spiel, and they all basically say the same thing, that we understand that you're a businessman, this is your business, and you didn't mean to do it, but you still did something really wrong. And that's what they say, right? I was like, I even got up and said, I understand I did something wrong, but look at it even logically. I say to them, I'm in jail and I see all this. And I say, if I was in jail, I could buy an ounce of grass for 2,000 pesos, which is about $30. In America, an ounce of grass is $200. So I would either have to be the stupidest drug trafficker in the world, or I didn't do anything malicious out of malice, So they start talking, they say the same thing, and they say, we're not going to give you a deal. We're not going to give you a probation deal because you're American. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 18 months and then you could leave the country. So now I'm already a year in. So
do you get good time? Is there a good time?
I
situation?
thought there was. That story's coming along. So I'm looking at it as my lawyer sitting there and telling me we'll get you out earlier, but worst case scenario is 18 months. I got 5.5 months left. I'm not doing 20 years. I'm okay.
Yeah, you can survive. Survived a year. I can survive 6 more months, maybe.
Right.
It's not the end of the world.
Now, what I didn't tell you before was I have 2 kids. I have a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old. Now, I'm very close to my kids. I share custody with my ex-wife, my first wife, and we're very close. Now, my 16-year-old's very high-strung and very anxious. He's a very anxious kid. So when this whole thing happened, he was so anxious, they took him out of school and started doing online school because he didn't know what was going on either. And I'm feeding him, telling him, and I'm very honest with my kids, and I'm telling him, well, I got this lawyer and this lawyer is putting together deals. And he's at this point, but he's a very intelligent kid. And he's like, number one, Santana's not dead. He's full of shit. He stole your money. And I don't know who to believe at this point. So he kind of gathered to himself that he doesn't know when dad's coming home, and my 12-year-old thinks I have a problem with my passport, so I'm stuck in Dominican Republic waiting in a resort, As a matter of fact, one of the things that I would always tell my kids, I need to speak to you twice a day. I need to speak to you in the morning when you wake up or around when you wake up and before you go to sleep.
If you sleep hot at night, you know how disruptive that can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above. That's where Ghost Bed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, Ghost Bed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts to your body's temperature, every Ghost Bed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firm option with exceptional support, your Ghost Bed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items are shipped within 24 hours. If you're not sure which Ghost Bed is right for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get a personalized recommendation. Even better, our listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/Cox and use the code COX at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/Cox with the code COX at the checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide.
So one day, I'll make you laugh. My son calls me very late in the day. I can't get through to him. He calls me very late. My 12-year-old calls me very late in the day. And I said, what's going on with you? Why didn't you call me? Because Dad, I was a little busy and this, that, and the other. I said, Scotty, I get really anxious. He doesn't know I'm in jail, but he knows I'm anxious because I want to speak to them. He said, Dad, I don't know why you're anxious. I'm safe. I'm with Mom. Why don't you go in the hot tub? Why don't you go in the pool? I'm sitting here. So, long story short, where I get 18 months, and my friend and my lawyer's telling me we'll get you out soon, and we'll get sort of time. We'll get, we'll get, even if you have to stay in the country, at least you won't be in that hellhole. So I'm thinking my max downside is I have to stay in the country to finish out the 18 months, and then I could go home. That's max downside. But upside is I get to go home right away. And even if worst possible case scenario is I have to fill the 18 months, I'm 2/3 there. I'm there. I'm right there. So I go back and I'm in kind of a better mood. And I told my kids that I would be home in a couple months, and I told my ex-wife, and I'm kind of in a better mood because after a year I know how to live here, or at least survive, but I also know there's a date I'm going home. So as time goes on, I'm bugging my lawyer, and it gets back to me that I became friends with this guy in the office who handles all the releases and everything like that. And he's actually going to school to be a lawyer. And he always helped me. And he tells me, Mike, you're not getting out early. By the time you get a court date for early release, you're going to be gone. Because that's the way the system works. It's fucked up. So now I'm facing the reality that I'm going to be there for the next 5 months, 5.5 months. So time goes on and I'm there, I'm there for the next 5 months, but I'm a lot less anxious because I know there's an end in sight. I'm walking every day and I'm just going through the motions. I'm figuring out what I have to figure out. I'm trying to make plans for afterwards. I'm contacting people, whatever it may be. So my mother tells me, I'll come when you get out and we'll go home together. The embassy comes and they said, we're not going to come back because you only have 2 months left. So we don't really need, everything's done with your case. So our job is essentially done. You don't do shit anyway. So
thank God for the embassy. Thank God we have these embassies. What are these guys doing?
Right. So I said, all right, whatever. It is what it is. Now, there was this guard. And everybody would kind of make jokes. And I was kind of friendly with the guards because they knew I wasn't a criminal. They knew I wasn't that guy. And I think they were told, watch the American, keep him safe. But what you have to understand is these guards make $500 a month.
Right.
That's what they make. So a lot of their money comes from extorting drug dealers in the prison to get them drugs and phones and all this.
Right.
So they have 2 incomes. So now, one of the guards, who I wasn't really friendly with, but we had no problems, one of the guards starts asking me for money, and not like $100, like 1,000,000 pesos, which is like 17 grand. And I was like, number one, I have no reason to give it to you. Number two, I don't have it.
Right.
And
if I had that kind of money, would I fucking be here?
Right. Would I fucking be here?
I'd have done paid these people.
Right. So I tell him basically to go fuck himself. And he tells me to fuck my mother. And he tells me that I'm a cheap gringo and this, that, and the other. So at this point, there's this new director and he's really tough. And his whole big thing is he came from anti-corruption. And his whole thing is he doesn't want violence and he doesn't want drugs. That's his thing. But I met him and we had a couple of sit downs and he's a really nice guy. Like I still talk to him to this day. Really nice guy. And I go to the director and I said, we got to talk. I said, this guy's intimidating me now. Because now joking around is one thing, but this guy's getting in my face and this guy's intimidating me. So I want you to know about this. So he refers me to the subdirector and I tell him the story. But to protect myself, I call the embassy. Because I think the embassy has to hear about this. They have to do something about this. Right. This is corruption.
Yeah, and this is government corrupt. This is an inmate stabbing
right.
each
This
other.
Is government substance corruption. Right. So I tell him the embassy gets involved. I have the meeting. I go to a meeting with the guard, and I go a meeting with the subdirector and him, and my friend Roy's sitting there, and he's translating. And basically, the outcome is he disappears for a week, but he was told when he comes back, don't look at me. He was told, don't look at me. So that gets all worked out. And now, at this point, the embassy's so fucked up. They block my number from my phone in prison 3 times. Like, I can't even call the fucking embassy. They're not picking up my mother's calls. It's really fucked up. Really, really is. Have you heard about, just as a sidebar, have you heard about the 3 Haitian kids?
No.
So there were these 3 Haitian kids, and they were green card holders in America. And they went to Santo Domingo on vacation one summer. And it was right during COVID. And they rented a car, and they went to a gas station in Santo Domingo, and the gas station attendant saw something under their car, called the cops. The cops came, found 3 pounds of grass beneath the car. The father, who's in Florida, now mind you, they're not citizens of the United States. The father's in Florida, calls up a news organization, calls up a local congresswoman. They're out of prison in 2 weeks. Now, this whole time I'm thinking about this, the embassy's telling me they can't do anything, but yet these 3 green card holders got out of prison in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So they can do something, they just don't want to do something.
Right.
In my opinion. So as far as I'm concerned, the embassy's a piece of shit at this point, and I just have to wait it out. It is what it is. So at this point, I have 2 months, and it got to the point where I was talking to the guards and everything like that, and it got to the point where like the guards would know how many days I had left, right? So I'm about 3 weeks out, and my embassy rep calls me, and he was like, he calls me on my phone. I was like, nice to hear from you. Would you unblock my number for the phone call? And he tells me, do you have your passport? I said, yeah, my mother has my passport. Well, is it still valid? I said, yeah, it's good till 27. And he said, well, we're going to issue you a new passport. I said, that doesn't make sense. I don't need a new passport. It's till 27. You know, I don't have any problems. So I did
your mother's not here.
My mother's coming. She has my passport.
Okay.
You know, and she left it with the guy who drives her around. So my passport's in the country.
Oh, okay.
You know, so he said, we're going to issue you a passport regardless. So that
Why? To make it sound like you did something?
Right. So that doesn't sound right. So I'm researching, I'm calling people and this, that, and the other, and I can't figure out what's going on. So I'm freaking out. Now I'm freaking out saying that, do I have a problem when I get out? So they call me back and I'm 2 weeks away from getting out now.
Right.
And he doesn't call me back. A marshal from the embassy calls me back. And he says, you have a warrant in Georgia. And it's an outstanding warrant. And we advise that you go to Georgia before you go to wherever you're going, resolve this, and then go home.
What's the warrant for?
I'm getting that. So I said, what's the warrant for? And he couldn't tell me much. So I told you I'd produce events. So one of the events right before, literally a week before COVID came out, was I was doing a show in Georgia. I was doing a show in Atlanta. And I had a balance when I went to the hall, and I wrote them a check, and the check bounced. And I forgot all about it because of COVID and everything like that. So he filed charges.
How much was the bounce check?
Like 10 grand, 12 grand. It wasn't a lot of money. So I get that story, but I call up the Atlanta PD because I would think that if I have a warrant in Georgia, the Atlanta PD has to know about it.
Right.
They can't find it. I call up 3 attorneys in Georgia, and they can't find it. So I said, if anybody could find this warrant, it has to be the district attorney. So I call the Atlanta district attorney, and they tell me that there is an active warrant. If you fly into Georgia, you're probably going to get arrested. But if you fly into New York, odds are you're not getting arrested. And the warrant is in the process of being dismissed because the court decided not to pursue it. They declined prosecution. So it's nothing. Right. So
what are these guys trying to get you? Oh, I suggest you fly to Georgia. Why? So I can get arrested?
Kind of like that. And like, I don't trust the embassy at this point. Right. I haven't trusted the embassy for over a year. So I'm freaking out now. I call a criminal attorney in New York, and I explained to him the whole situation. He was like, Mike, I'm going to try to get to the bottom of it. I called up a friend of a friend who said that the warrant's being dismissed, but keep my number in case anything happens when you land in New York, and I'll get you bail in New York because that's what's going to happen. So I get out. My mother's there. We're crying, the whole bed. Happy ending, right. So we go to the hotel. We have a flight the next day. I'm going home for Christmas. I'm going to be home on the 23rd. I'm going to see my kids for Christmas. This is awesome. So I get to JFK in New York, and I'm shitting my pants on the line with customs because I don't know what's going to happen, if I'm going to get pulled, if I'm going to get arrested, if I don't know what's going to happen. So we get to the line where you show the Border Patrol your passport. Now, the day before, I had to go to the embassy and get this emergency 5-day passport because my passport was revoked because I had this warrant.
Oh, okay.
The State Department
that was the reason they were saying we're going to issue you a warrant.
Right. So I get to the thing, and they pull me. So I'm like, am I getting arrested? Oh, fuck, So I get to the thing, and they pull me, and I go into this little room. And now my kids are on the way to the airport to pick me up.
Right.
So I get to this little room, and the guy, the Border Patrol agent, or the Homeland Security agent, was Dominican, and he actually worked with the DNCD, and he's looking, and he's like, you have this warrant in Georgia, but that's nothing. Don't worry about that. Just figure it out when you can. But you just got back from prison.
Yeah.
And he basically was grilling me, not even to put notes in the system. Did they give you any? For curiosity. Not only did they put notes in the system, but he was like, "What happened?" He knew what prison I was in. He was like, "It's one of the worst prisons in DR." You know what happened? So I was telling him stories and bullshit with him for like 15 minutes. And he was like, all right, I'll let you go. Just take care of the Georgia thing, and I'll make notes. I said, do I have to? I said, do I get pulled? If I get pulled over in New York, like for a traffic stop or something, are they going to see this? He was like, no. He was like, I'm Homeland Security, so I see this.
Yeah.
But nobody else will see it. You have a clean record in New York. So I see my kids, and it was the happiest moment of my life, you know. And now I spend Christmas with my family and do all this and do an intro. And, you know, it's just... People say
when so this was this Christmas.
Yeah,
this is a month ago.
This is 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
Okay. Colby, did you think this was years ago?
Well, no. When you were in the bathroom, I asked him when all this was. He said it got out like the last year.
No, I said everything was happening within the last year.
Yeah.
But my court date, I was getting out. A year and a half was December 22nd of this year.
Oh yeah.
No.
See, I didn't realize.
Oh, okay.
December, no, you mean 2024.
24, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
so it was last year.
Right,
3 weeks ago.
technically,
Yeah.
right. But it was 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So, you know, everybody said to me, you look great for coming out of prison 2 weeks ago.
It's
You
done
know?
wonders for you.
Right,
You lost
so-
100 plus pounds.
I said, everybody said, well, you might have PTSD, and you went through a really traumatic experience. And I said, look, I dealt with the violence, and I dealt with the extortion, and I dealt with all the bullshit. But all I really cared about was getting home to my mom and kids.
Right.
And once that happened, I'll make money again. I lost my business. That's fine. But once that happened, I'm fine again. You know, I'm good, you know? So, you know, in the interim, my ex-wife called me up. My first ex-wife called me up, and she said, look, the lease is up on my house. You can't pay me child support right now. She was very cool about it. You know, I can't afford to pay $6,000 without your child support. I can't afford to pay $6,000 for a 5-bedroom house in New York. What do I do? And she knew I always wanted to move to Florida. I have to move to Florida or North Carolina. I said, move to Florida. So now my kids are in New York with me for Christmas, you know, but I have to go to Florida. So I have to move my entire life to Florida in 3 weeks. So now, after Christmas, 4 days ago, I bring the kids back to Florida. I'm looking for a place. That's where we are today.
Where in Florida?
Just outside Sarasota, called Lakewood Ranch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you already know exactly where you're moving? I mean, you've already got the house?
She already has a house. And I've seen some. So, you know, within 10 minutes, 15 minutes of her house, I want to be, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the cliff notes of the last 18 months of my life.
Okay. You have something?
Whoa. It's 12:50.
Oh, okay.
I mean, my question is, are you when you travel on you flew down here from New York?
Yeah.
I was going to ask you if you drove. Did you drive through Georgia?
No,
Or like what's
no. I'm not going near Georgia right now. Until my lawyer tells me that warrant is expunged, I'm not going near Georgia. I'm good. But, you know, I never want to leave the country again. Dude, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I definitely. That's not a glowing endorsement for Dominican Republic at all. You know,
no, because when you go to Dominican Republic, or when people go to Dominican Republic, they see the airport, which is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
They see the shuttle bus, which is beautiful, and then they see a 5-diamond resort. Basically, like America was, you know, moved to Dominican Republic.
Right.
But when you go out, it's a third world. Yeah, you know, that's what it is.
It's like when you go to Mexico and you go to the resort, and then you take a bus to like Chichen Itza, right?
Yeah.
You know, the whatever, the Mayan ruins or Incan ruins, I forget which one it was, but like right now it's a highway. The first time I ever went, they didn't have the highway yet. So it was the dirt road.
That's
and
great.
they actually stopped in a village.
Yeah.
And you realized, you're like, this is what, and so we asked, we're like, is this a normal Mexican village?
This
and
is
they were
how
like,
you live. Yeah.
They're like, we're like, no, this can't be. Like, it can't, they're like, no, 90% of the country lives like this.
Right.
And you're like these are fucking huts and shit.
Well,
Like,
that's what I learned to understand, that while I was inside, a lot of these prisoners didn't mind it because it was kind of a step up from where they actually lived.
Yeah.
You know, and they were used to the violence. They were used to what was going on in that environment, you know? So it was just another day, you know, another day in the jungle type of thing, you know? Yeah. And that's what I learned to realize. It's weird, man. It's we, you know, I think the embassy and I think a lot of our representatives are real shit. I really do. Mm-hmm. But I'm grateful to be an American. You know, you know,
that's what kills me. These people who are, I'm leaving this country. Like, well, you've never been out of this country. You don't know what 95% of the world lives like. You have no idea. This country is horrible. Listen, if you can't get rich in America, man, you might as well just.
But not even getting rich.
Well, I mean, look, the fact is that we live better than almost everybody. The poorest Americans live better than the middle class in Canada.
Sure.
The poorest Americans are almost like they're rich in most countries.
Sure.
And nobody understands that.
No, because we're instilled this sense of reality. You know, we're instilled this, you know, we wake up every day and we could go to Dunkin' and get our coffee, and we could go to, you know, Best Buy and get our Apple and products, and we could do everything that we can do. But they don't understand that in these countries, I mean, even Canada, but in third world countries, that's not reality. You know, the reality is that you have two options. You could go through schooling and maybe become successful, but you could become a criminal, and that's how you're going to feed your family. And that's the way it is, you know? So a lot of people are just groomed to be criminals, you know, and they're okay with that life, and that's fine, you know?
Yeah, when you're surrounded by it, you don't even know. It's not abnormal at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole fish in a water. A fish doesn't realize he's in water. It's his entire life. So it's natural to him. He doesn't even think about it.
Do you think that lawyer really died?
My 16-year-old doesn't think so. I'm naive, so I think maybe he did, but I don't know. My 16-year-old doesn't think so. Other people don't think so, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you a thing.
Can we break for the 30 and pick up again? Would you be okay with us
I'm
picking
fine.
up? Is that okay? I made almost.
Is it hard to write a book?
I don't think so, but I'm someone who, and really you are too. I already know this because you're an event planner. I'm someone who sees this is the goal, and every day I just have to work toward it. Right? Most people don't see that. Most people are like, I got to get through this hour.
100%.
To make my $22, I got to get through this hour. That's how most people think.
Right.
So if you're somebody who could say, hey, this is my goal, these are the things that have to be done, and every day I need to work towards that, you realize, and that's what happens is you write out an outline, and every day you do a little bit. Doesn't have to be a lot. Sometimes you write 2 pages. Sometimes you write 2 sentences or a sentence.
Right.
And then, but what happens is that in 6 months you turn around, and the outline's done, and you're like, holy shit, I got a fucking book here.
Right.
That
makes sense.
That's what this is.
Because my whole thing was, and I'm sure you could imagine just from this, I could talk about this for days. You know, I could go into stories and
So you know we're recording this.
Oh, are you? Okay.
So
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah, so I could talk about this for days.
Right.
But, you know, we scratched the surface. So, you know, like I'm trying to talk about obviously the similarities between you and other interviews that I've had, but there's also like I'm trying to also give different stories or different avenues or different ways to tell it with other people, so it's more interesting with different interviews. So my whole thing is, do I just make the outline and just jot down a story or two every day, or go in order, beginning, middle, end? You know, like that's my whole thing.
Chronologically. Obviously, I would start off with a prologue.
Right.
A prologue's just some event that...
It's intro.
Yeah, it's an intro where the person reads it. They kind of understand that this is a guy who's in jail, he's innocent, and oh my God, something horrific's happening right now, and oh my gosh. And then you kind of end it, and then you start back to the beginning. Hey, I was born in New Jersey, or whatever. And then how you got there. I would very quickly get into the guts of the story within 3 or 4 chapters.
That's what I try to do, yeah.
And then you span the next 10 chapters of the events that took place. And you just told the story great. So it's really taking that story. And I understand there's a lot of extra stories. Like there's lots of, in my book, and I'll give you a copy of it.
I would appreciate that. Yeah.
There's lots of extra stories that never make it into my book.
Sure.
Because I got to a point where I was like, I'm telling this story, but does it further the overall story? Or am I telling this story because it just makes me look good?
Right.
Or this made me look smart? Or this was it's like you have to get to a point where you're like, look,
when's enough?
It's too much.
Right.
It's like watching, look, the first Iron Man, amazing.
Phenomenal.
Amazing.
Right. Yeah.
I can't watch an Avengers movie. It's too much.
I get it.
It's just too much.
Yeah.
And so it was really same thing with Deadpool. First one, amazing. The last one was so much, bro. Like
right.
You could have knocked 30 minutes off of that, and it would have been a great.
You know
movie.
how they're avoiding this now with the universes? There's different universes. So like Batman has 14 different universes.
Right.
You know, like that's how they're avoiding it, making it interesting because there's different stories that go into different universes. You know, Batman might have been killed by Superman but over here he's not.
I mean, I get it, but
Yeah.
they're throwing Batman through 4 buildings.
Right.
You know, the villains are bigger and
Right.
meaner and worse. And the fight scenes, I don't need a 5-minute or 10-minute fight scene.
Right.
I'm good with a 1.5-minute fight scene.
Right.
Some of the best fight scenes that I remember from Iron Man 1 was when the tanks come around the corner and they fire at him. He just moves out of the way
Right.
and he shoots a little pew.
Right.
Boom. The best fight scene in Indiana Jones in the Temple, or
Sure.
I'm sorry, Indiana Jones, the first one, is when the guy walks out and does all the sword tricks.
Yeah.
And he goes like, "Fuck, I can't go through this." Boom, and he just shoots him. Those are the great fight. Like I don't need you to throw this guy through 6 buildings and have. And pick up a boat and hit him with it. Like,
it's the same thing with like Fast and Furious. You know, the first Fast and Furious was incredible.
Yeah, I never after probably the second one.
Yeah.
By the second one, I was like, yeah. By the third one, I think I might have watched 5 minutes of it on TV and was like,
I watched all of them because I was a fan of the series. But like, it's just throwing so much shit in that. But the problem is, I think what what Hollywood does, they're just out of fucking stories. You know, they're just out of like what else are they gonna do?
But it's. The problem is that they're not out of stories. There are tons of stories. The problem is that they're so ingrained in trying to make these blockbusters. They overlook like, hey, we know Iron Man does good. Let's make 6 of them. Like, okay, what are you doing? And everyone has to be bigger. It's like you really don't. Like, you could probably take a small part. Why wouldn't you just go ahead and take that $300 million budget and just take 30 million each and make 30 different films.
Right.
And you're probably, if 50% of those hit, they're probably going to do better than all the Iron Man ones, and they just don't seem to do that. And they overlook a ton of stories and there's a ton of material that just gets overlooked. And, and it's
really wild.
It's a shitty business model. You would think that they would have fixed it by now. Especially since it fails so often.
Agreed. But now you turn around and you have an interesting story like yours or mine, and it's impossible to get a fucking movie deal.
And that's what I was going to say to you when we were talking earlier was that, there are people that write stories and option those stories, and that's all they do their entire career. Never had a movie made. They've optioned 30 stories that keep getting re-optioned, and they make their entire living just optioning stories
without ever getting.
They never get made. You're making $200,000 a year or $300,000 a year based on just options that you don't even care if it gets made because.
So I'm a little unclear. What's an option?
An option on a story is like, that someone comes to you and says, "Look, we love your story."
Right.
So let's say Sony comes to you and says, "Look, we want to make a movie out of your story."
Sure.
You go, "Okay, wow, that's amazing."
Yeah.
Or maybe even a series. Yours is because it's so unique. Could probably be a whole series, right? It could be multiple series because I don't think there's enough time in a movie.
No, I don't either.
So, but let's say they say, for the sake of argument, they come to you and they say, "We're gonna make a movie," and you go, "Okay," and then you say, "Hey, I want $1 million for my life rights in order for you to use my story and my likeness, and because that's what making your story. What makes your story unique is it's true,
right?
Right." Because they could say, well, let's just take his basic story and change it a little bit, and we'll do it. Yeah, that's fine. But what really makes it unique is the fact that it was true, and
right.
that's what gives it legs initially. Then, of course, it's character development, drama, the whole thing.
Sure.
That's fine. But that's season 3, 4, 5, 6. But initially, it's, hey, this really happened.
Right.
Which is how Orange is the New Black, right? It was a real story. But by the second season, it's over.
Right.
You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
It's all
Like, we've
done.
run out. And they exaggerated a bunch of that to begin with.
Right.
But yours is great on its own.
Right.
So the point is that they say, hey, we want to turn yours into a series. Okay. And you say, well, they go, well, what do you want for your life rights? So we can use your likeness. You'll also do you'll do promotions,
stuff,
you know.
yeah.
And you go, I want, let's for the sake of argument, I want $1 million. They
Sure.
go, great. We'll give you $1 million. Or usually they'll come in and they'll say,
Give you $750. Yeah.
well, no, what they typically do is they'll give you a portion of the budget.
Like in
So
advance.
you get like, no, not in advance.
Okay.
They'll say, we're going to give you 3% of the budget.
Okay.
So let's say the budget is $40 million. You're going to get, that's 1.2 million.
Right.
So that's really what you typically argue for is I want let's say as far as a movie is concerned, you typically want a portion of the budget and then you get so much on the back end. You'll never get that because they expense it out. But if you don't know any better, you think it's exciting. Like,
Sure.
oh my God, and I'm going to get oh my God, it's going to be a blockbuster. I'm going to make so much money. You're never going to make that.
Right. Don't count
You'll
on
be
that.
lucky. You might get a check for 50, 100,000.
Right.
But they say, let's say 1.2 million. And you go, okay, great. So when do I get that? And they go, well, when we get the budget, you get it.
Okay.
But and you go, okay, well, that may, when's that going to happen? That may never happen. And I'm not going to stop shopping my story. So they go, great, we'll option it.
Okay.
So we're going to give you an option. And usually options like maybe, whatever, or like 5% or whatever. So they'll say, we're going to give you $60,000 now for an 18-month option.
Okay.
So here's 60,000. You can't shop it. You're tied up in a contract. We have 18 months to try and get an actor that's involved, wants to play you, a production company that is going to partner with us and going to actually do the production, the right director. So all of these people that are going to get together so that we can turn it into an actual movie. So they start putting that together. They get a screenwriter. They write it. They pitch it. They start showing it to everybody. They get some actor. He goes, "Oh my God, it's amazing! I love it." And then they give some director says, "I have to direct this." So then, by the time it's all done, said and done, then they have scheduling. Then they say, "Guess what? We brought it to the studio and everything. It's amazing. We're going to get it done." They give them the $40 million. You get your money.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's how it happens. The
So
problem
now-
is it never happens in 18 months.
Right.
In 18 months, they typically get a one automatic renewal.
Okay.
So you get another $60,000, right? Now, unless it's something amazing, over the top, it's been in Rolling Stone magazine, everybody in the world's covered it, you typically don't get those types of options. The options now are $5,000, $10,000, maybe $20,000.
Now, let me ask you a question. Are the options better when it starts? You understand what I'm saying? So let's say you got out of prison 5 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it is. So was the option hotter 4 years ago than it is now? Or is it just as, it's just pretty stagnant? You understand what I'm saying?
So I optioned, or I was a part of an option. Or I wrote this guy's story. We got him in Rolling Stone magazine, and it got optioned. The option was $50,000.
Okay.
It was optioned 3 times by Warner Brothers. Well, they passed on the last option, and they sold it off to, I want to say AMC, maybe it was AMC, whatever.
Sure.
And they didn't pay the same. They paid a little bit less. So I think they paid like $40,000 for
Right.
the option.
Okay.
And so it all across the board got a little bit less.
It's very interesting.
Yeah. So sometimes, it's called turnaround where they pass on it.
Right.
And they sell to somebody. So now it's in turnaround. I don't know where this phrase but so these guys have it. And what's so funny is if you watch like the movie or the series Entourage, you hear all these things.
I never saw it, but I'm going to.
It's hilarious.
I heard it was.
And you really, in a way, although in Entourage, things happen much quicker than
Sure.
they really happen, but the chaos of what is happening on that TV show is true. Like you say, we've got this actor. And then you go, oh my gosh, and the screenwriter he read it, and they love it, and they're going. And then you get this director, and that director says, oh, I won't work with that actor.
Right.
but we have to have this director. Why? Because if we get this director, if we pitch him to Sony, they'll greenlight anything because he's already done 3 pictures with him. So it's a guaranteed green light. So guess what? We got to get rid of the actor.
Okay.
And you get rid of the actor, and now the screenwriter says, "Oh, you get rid of fucking Tommy. We're done.
Right.
I won't work with anybody but Tommy."
Right.
I mean, it's like
It's a shit show. Everything can fall apart. Right.
and it takes forever. Now in Entourage, these things happen much quicker. You know, the series, like within two or three episodes, they're making a movie.
Right.
Like that's not what's happening.
I gotta watch the show. Everybody tells me about Entourage. I never saw it.
It's super funny because it's just the actors in general. They're all everybody involved in that business is a knucklehead, and you think, how do you couldn't function in any other aspect than this, any other industry than this.
But square one from this option process starts off by somebody seeing something like this or the news or something like that. Is that how it works?
It can.
Right.
There was a guy on. There have been a few guys on here who have had their life rights optioned by being on this show. Good example is Jeff Turner. Jeff Turner had a story about counterfeiting.
Sure.
And he was contacted by a producer who I believe contacted me and said, "Hey, I'd like to get in touch with this guy." And then I sent him there, and then like 2 weeks later, Jeff called me and said, "Hey, I was contacted by this producer."
No shit.
And he said he is partnered with a screenwriter, and they want to option my life rights. And I said, and initially they didn't want to pay him anything. They were like, yeah, you sign this. And he's like, they sent me something. Can I send it to you? And they sent it to me. And I was like, yeah, no. They got to pay you something.
Of course.
So, they try and get you for nothing. So we end
Yeah,
up.
but they're taking you off the market. So what's your motivation to get off the market?
Yeah, but they don't want to pay.
Right.
Obviously, if they can get away with not paying you, they don't.
Of course.
So I get what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you're a dick for doing that to me, for even trying me like that, but they do. And honestly, in these guys' defense, I don't think they had a ton of money, but they end up paying him. I don't want to say what the amount was, but it was a decent chunk of change. I said, no, go back to him, say this, go back to him. Well, he said, then he comes back. He's like, they said that people don't buy options anymore. I go, no, okay, tell them now they're liars. And I just sold one for $8,000.
Right.
So we go back and forth, and they end up paying him. And then and they did, they wrote a screenplay. They pitched it. They optioned it a second time. Nice. So, I have a buddy I had a guy contacted me who writes true crime. He's already written a book on my buddy. They're optioning that. That's possible. Wild. But the easiest way is for you to write a book.
Yeah.
Because then you can say.
But now, does that take you, when you get optioned, does that take you off the market? So my question is, are you allowed to do other interviews? Are you allowed to do?
You're allowed. Okay. Well, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, you can't do any other interviews if you have a book, you get to say, no, go fuck yourself. I sell my book by doing these interviews.
Right.
So I'll do that. That's fine. The option needs to be $100,000. And they go, oh, okay, no. Oh.
Go do what you want. Right. Real quick.
Yeah. It drops right away.
Yeah.
So, and everybody I know that has a book, that's what they do. It's like, no. I do interviews. You could tell them I get paid for interviews, whether you do or not. They don't know. I get paid for interviews. It's a negotiation.
Sure.
And then they go, okay, no, you're right. Okay, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Because I've had guys say, well, we don't want you to get overexposed. I'm like, what, like Nike?
Right.
Like Adidas?
Right. Google?
Like, cut the fucking shit, bro. That doesn't mean a damn thing. Besides that, I promise you, when you're done writing this screenplay, it'll look nothing like my story.
Right.
That all the dollar amounts will be bigger. My escapes will be huger. I'll be this mastermind guy that doesn't really exist.
Right.
I'm a bumbling idiot.
Right.
You're going to paint me in some completely different fashion.
Sure.
So it's not going to be what it is now anyway. I know you're going to Hollywood it up.
Right.
So it's irrelevant.
Right.
Like the movie War Dogs.
I love War Dogs.
Right, so Ephraim Deveroli, played by Jonah Hill,
sure.
I wrote his memoir.
Did you really?
I met him in prison. I wrote his memoir in prison. I can tell you right now, that movie is not what
right.
happened.
It's full of shit. Right.
Right. It's just what they do. It's what they do. It's fine. So your best bet is write a book, even if it's 200 pages. It doesn't have to be a 350-page book.
Right.
It could be a 200-page book. Here's the problem: is now you have a recorded document. It's intellectual property. It's recorded. You can have it recorded in, I almost said public records, in the Library of Congress. This is my recorded intellectual property. So if somebody else goes and makes a movie that's similar to it, you can say, no, that's too close to what I have on record as being mine. It gives you an option to sue, and they kind of know that. So they'll either change it so much that you're like, yeah, it's similar, but not quite.
And you're saying Amazon does this?
No, I'm saying you can.
No, I know what you're saying.
You can write a book
but
and publish it on Amazon.
And they don't have to vet it or anything. They just do it.
Amazon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why are they vetting it? It's true, right?
No, of course. No, I'm saying vet it as far as, is it going to make money? Is it worth us publishing it? Like
Well,
that.
look, every time it costs Amazon about $3 to publish a book.
Okay.
So if somebody pays them $22, then they take $3.50 out of the 22. So now we're down to whatever, $18.50.
Sure.
And then they say, we're going to give you 60% of that. And you go, okay, so I'm going to make $9 or $10 or whatever. Let's say 50-50. Let's say, so you say, okay, so I'm going to end up making, $9.25 every book. And they go, right. And we're keeping the rest.
Right.
The person pays for the mailing, and that's it.
And is that the same thing with like audiobooks? Like the way it's
audiobooks even better because they don't have to make anything.
Right.
You can do the audio yourself, or you can actually go to somebody who will do the audio for you, and then they'll take like 40% of the cut, or 50-50, and they only do that for like 3 years.
Well, Amazon has
Audible.
Audible, that's it.
Yeah.
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 I'm a big fan of Audible.
I mean, yeah, I love Audible.
Yeah.
But you could do the Audible yourself. Once you've written the book, you then do an Audible. Because when I was saying I make whatever, $1,000, $1,200 a month on this, keep in mind like 400 or 500 of it is Audible.
Is it really?
And I didn't even do my own Audible because I read like at a fourth grade level. I didn't pay somebody. I made a deal with somebody. He did the whole Audible. He got my book. He did the whole Audible. He put it up, everything.
No shit.
I made a jacket cover, and then I get a check cut. So and they only do that for so many years. I think I just said like 3 years, but I think it's like 5 or 6 years. Anyway, at some point here soon, Audible will cut him out, and I'll get his chunk.
We gotta go over this whole thing.
Yeah, I can go over everything.
100%.
It's
really fascinating though. Like I didn't know that you didn't need a publisher to write a book. I thought you needed a publisher to get a book, and that's how it works. But you could kind of self-publish through Amazon.
Right. And keep in mind too, if it's huge, like we know guys that put out a book a few months ago. I mean, it only stayed up so long because it was too salacious, and it had to do with Diddy's baby's mama who died, and it was supposed to be her memoir, right? Before she died. It's not, but whatever. They put it up, and because it said some horrific things about her former husband, he got it taken down because he threatened to sue Amazon and sue this guy, whatever. But it was up for a month. It made roughly $400,000.
No shit.
In a month. Now that's never.
That's a pipe dream, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I would love to reproduce that.
Right.
Right. But it did make me think, hey, maybe you need to start going with some celebrity shit.
Sure.
Like I know guys who make a living who write books that are complete bullshit, and they put them up and make a living doing that. So, you just have to look. If you've written a book and you continue to do podcasts, the book's going to sell.
Right.
Because every time you do a podcast, that's just free advertisement.
Of course.
So it just keeps selling and selling. And at some point, if it's sold enough, Amazon says, hey, we're going to start promoting this. Why? Because people are buying it and they're leaving great comments. And he's got a 4 out of 5 or 4.5 out of 5 star rating. And people seem to like this. So then they start and you can also advertise it.
This is super interesting
you
to
can
me.
pay to advertise the book.
No shit. Like boost it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Through Amazon Marketplace, I think it's through.
No shit. It's very interesting. Super interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm not exactly living on my book, on my royalties, but I do know the process.
Right.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it was an op. I didn't know it was a thing. You know?
And you don't, like I said, you don't have to have a 300-page book. Write a 150, 200-page book.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be eloquent, but if you write as good as you told the story, it's going to be a pretty good book.
Yeah.
I
mean, now that, and even towards the end of my sentence, I've been telling this story. Like I pretty much got this. Like I got how to tell the story down.
Yeah.
But putting into a book is a little different, so that's what my whole mental hang up. And I think it's all mental. I really do. I think it's all mental that, I never wrote a book. I wrote the last thing I wrote was, the content from my website or the, like stupid little things, but, I think it's more intimidation where, writing a 300-page book or a 200-page book is more intimidating than writing a story or telling a story. But the way you say it, where, write one story a day, write a page a day, and I think that makes sense.
Well, listen, there are times when I would sit there and the good thing about an outline is it stops being this monumental task.
Right.
Because you've written a 10-page outline, right? Which is just really, bullet points. Chapter 1, and obviously it could change. Chapter 1, right? Childhood, and then you bullet point. I was never supposed to be born. For instance, in my case, my mother went in for a hysterectomy in 1969 and found out she was pregnant. She was like 4 months pregnant with me.
That's fucking crazy.
Right. So I'm not even supposed to be here. Like the doctor actually cut her open.
That's wild.
And was like,
that's something new, right?
Pregnancy. Like they'd already adopted 3 kids. She wasn't supposed to be able to get pregnant.
No shit. That's
so she
wild.
was barren. So the fact that she's pregnant and I didn't spontaneous abort after he cut her open was amazing. So,
that's incredible.
So that's a little story.
Right.
It's only a paragraph or 2.
Right.
And then you put another bullet point is, my father was an alcoholic, or, I didn't live up to his expectations, or, you put little bullet points. That's it. Just enough to remember. You don't have to say anything crazy. Just enough to remember the story. Just, learning disability, dad was disappointed. That's it.
Right.
And then chapter 2, this. Chapter 3. So you do that over the course of, you don't have to do that in an hour. You write that over the course of 3 days.
Right.
But once it's done, you just have to go back and say, write this one thing today. And maybe it's 3 paragraphs.
Right.
Maybe it's a page and a half. I've stared at the page and literally for 2 hours, 3 hours, and walked away and I've written 4 sentences.
Right.
Just couldn't get it out.
But on the flip side, you could walk away with 8 pages or 10 pages on the same thing.
What's great is the next day when I'm scheduled to write again, or I think get up an extra hour early to write, throughout the day, I've thought to myself, how would I write next thing?
Right.
Oh, I got to remember to say this. Oh, wait, I'm going to say that. I remember. I'll always remember my mom had this blue dress that she wore. You see what I'm saying? And so by the time you sit down the next time, boom, three paragraphs.
Yeah.
If you wrote 3 or 4 paragraphs a day for 6 months, look, honestly, for 4 months, you've got a book. It's over.
That's crazy.
By 6 months, you've had somebody read it over for typos and had an editor read it and edit it, and you're talking about what's the jacket cover. Do I want to do a jacket cover where I do kind of like a what is that? The glamour shot?
Right.
I'm gonna do a glamour shot.
Yeah.
Jacket cover. Or do I want to have one where I'm holding 2 knives and blood's running down my face and I'm going, you know what I'm saying? You get to think those
of course.
things. That's the fun part, right? So, you can do that, and you don't have to think about it. You just have to think about the next story and the next story.
I've had a book title and a jacket cover idea.
Of course,
for months, a year. Yeah.
Listen, every guy that wants to open, I learned this in prison. After guys would come to me and they want me to write like business plans for them or talk to them about everybody, not everybody, but every guy that approached me in prison to help them try and write a business plan to open up a restaurant that they have no business opening, that they have no experience in. Every one of them had a koi pond.
Of course.
and I would listen to them for 45 minutes telling me about how they this and this and we're gonna get and we're gonna have valet. And we have this and this and by the third guy I'd be like, what about a koi pond? I thought about that. I thought I want to have a koi pond. Like, yeah,
that's hysterical.
And then I would get to the point where they'd come and they'd talk to me and I'd be like, yeah, no, look, I know you've got the valet and you got the site location and you got this and that, what you're gonna serve. And I know you touched that, and I understand you've laid in bed and you've thought about the koi pond. They're like, how'd you know? Because you're just another idiot.
Right.
But anyway, so yeah, everybody does that. The name of the book, they've got themselves on the jacket cover in some way.
Right.
It's the actual writing. It's like planning the wedding and not thinking much about the marriage.
I've done that twice.
So your first thing is write the outline.
Yeah.
And then you just have to follow the outline. And then in 4 months from now, 5 months, it's done. And then it's a month of polishing. And then when you're done, you say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put it on Amazon. And that way you've got something recorded and you can hand it to people. And, and you can take that book and turn it into a synopsis, which is 10 or 15 pages. And that's even better because then you can hand it to people. You can hand it to a producer.
And that AI does that now.
Yeah. Just dump your whole book into it. I need a synopsis. And you can fine tune that and say, I need a 12,000 word synopsis of this 50,000 word book. And then it'll go, and then you got that.
Wild.
Play with it a little bit. And then you can have something, because when you go to a producer and you say, listen, I've written a book, I've been on a bunch of podcasts, I have over 10 million views on podcasts, my story's amazing, it was covered on ABC, on Fox News, on CNN. It was huge. It was in whatever, this such and such business magazine. And they go, okay. And they go, well, do you have something? And then for you to hand them a 200-page book, they're going to be like Jesus.
Well, fuck, what am I going to do now?
Oh, fuck, I don't have 10 hours to invest in this. Maybe what you can do is you can say, hey, here's 12 pages. And they go,
Cliff Notes.
Now you're talking.
Right.
I can read this. Or you could say, hey, you pick the podcast you think you did the best on. You can send them that link and they'll listen to it on the way to work.
I like that. Makes a lot of sense.
Right. But these are all the things that they would want because they have to turn that into a pitch deck and pitch it to somebody.
Right. I like it.
Right. It sounds like I know everything about it, does it? And yet I have hit wall after wall after wall.
Well, they have a saying. I forget exactly what the saying is.
Those that can't do, teach.
Well, I wasn't going to go there. No, but, quitting is the biggest failure or something to that effect. I'll never quit,
No, I have no. Listen, bro, I always say like losers have the best stories.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that like, I don't have a problem with failure. I have a problem with not trying.
I agreed 100%.
If you told me you'd open up 6 businesses and every one of them failed, I'd be like, yeah, but you've opened 6 businesses. Like you're gonna.
What's
you're
number
gonna
7?
hit.
Right.
It's the guy who says, no, I worked at Walmart and daydreamed my entire life about opening a business and never did it. It's like, yeah, damn, bro. That's.
I'm the same exact way. I'm with you. Yeah.
I've been failing my whole fucking life. I've been failing my way through life, but I've been.
But you do what you do, right?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, and that's the way that I always my second ex-wife always just tell me. Well, I'm taking count now.
Yeah.
She always just tell me every day it's a different idea. I said yes, every day it's a fucking different idea because that's what I like. That's what I always think of things to do and different avenues to go on because. If you don't try, you fail. That's what it is.
Do you know what a jackass thing that is for her to say? I tell you right now.
She was an idiot anyway.
Yeah, I tell you right now. You should look up. There's a interview with Jeff Bezos, and so the guy sits down. He's like, "Man, Amazon. When you came up with that idea, like, he's like, oh, everybody said it was horrible. They were like, the internet thing is nothing. And they were, and he does the whole thing about how everybody was saying, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy. It's never going to work. It's crazy. Like, what are you going to sell books? Why would someone buy a book on that? You can't look it up. You can't read it. You can't this. You got to, he's like, no, but it's the biggest thing. And I don't need to store it. And I don't. And so, he does the whole thing on the books thing. And they're like, yeah. And then that was it. It was huge. He's like, yeah, well, there were many, many times when it wasn't going to be huge.
I mean, look at our president. Our president went bankrupt 7 times before he made it,
But what he does is when you listen to the interview, he says, it's funny. He said, everybody focuses on Amazon.
Yeah.
And how big Amazon, and then they mentioned 1 or 2 other things that he's done. They're like, and you did this and that's huge, and you did this and that's huge. He's like, yeah, no, those are huge. Those are great money makers. They're huge. And they're like, yeah, wow. He's like, it's funny because everybody always focuses on those.
Of course.
And they're like, right. Why? Why do you say that? And he goes, nobody ever focuses on the
10
Blue
projects.
Bell, the Blue Bell app that we started.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's that? He's like, exactly. We dumped $500 million into it. It took us 18 months. We lost all of it. Yeah. Nobody ever remembers the $400 million we dumped into this project that went belly up and all the investors. Like, he names like 6 things that he had done that failed. And he said, they only focus on the positive. He said, trust me, he said, we've had more failures than we've had successes.
Of course.
Yes, but the successes, when they're successful, they're huge.
Right.
And that's how I feel. It's like, I'll keep throwing shit at
Me and you
wall.
are very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't mind failing.
No.
I don't mind failing. I fail all the time. not trying that bothers me.
I always said, I've been rejected my whole life. It's no big deal. I think that was a Seinfeld line.
It's so funny because my wife is taking her captain's license right now.
To captain what?
To captain boats.
No shit. That's awesome.
And she, listen, the last couple days, she's like, I don't know, there's 5 parts, and I don't know if I should take all the parts at once because I don't think I'm ready. And she's like, I can take like one every week. I can take one and I can focus on. I'm like, you just blew through the entire 3 weeks of classes, making almost, all 100s on your tests. Why would you not think you're going to pass? She's like, I don't know. I just, the tests are different than the ones in class. I'm like, maybe, but you're prepared. And she's like, I'm like, why not just take all of them? She's like, what if I fail it? I'm like, yeah, but you can just take it again.
Right.
And she's like, I know, but you can only take it 3 times and then you have to take the whole thing. I'm like, so what?
Yeah.
Like, she doesn't, like most people, they don't want to even attempt something because they're afraid they're going
of
to
the rejection.
fail.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck.
No, I couldn't give a fuck.
I'll fail and fail. And I'm going to pass it.
Eventually. Right.
And if everybody's, oh yeah, but you failed, fuck you.
My buddy, I told you when I was telling the story, I told you my buddy who owned the vape shop when I first started getting the vape from it. We became very close friends. We still see each other to this day. I mean, he's a very personable guy, not a bad looking guy, a good looking guy. And he always tells me, he always says, and when I was bigger, it was, I was bigger, and he always said, you get laid a lot more than I do. I said, well, I ask a lot more than you do.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like, I can't ask. I said, you have a great personality. I said, you have a great personality. You carry a conversation really well. You make yourself the center of the room when you do it. That's all it is. Well, what if they say no? Well, then you go up to the next one. Yeah.
I've never seen her before.
Right.
I'll never see her again.
And even if I do, who gives a fuck?
Especially if you go up to them expecting them to say no.
Right.
Like I've dated women. These guys are like, I can't find a girlfriend. But then you're afraid to ask.
Right.
You're afraid. My dad told me this joke, and I've told this before. The name of the joke is, it's a numbers game. And it's 2 guys standing at a bus stop. You probably heard this. There's 2 guys standing at a bus stop, and this girl walks by, and the one guy looks at her and he goes, hey, baby, you want to go back to my place and screw? And she slaps him in the face and walks off. Another girl walks by, and he goes, hey, baby, you want to go back to my place and screw? Boom, she slaps him in the face and walks off. Another girl walks by, he goes, want to go back to my place and have sex? Bam, she slaps him. The guy standing next to the guy asking looks at him and just starts laughing. And he goes, man, you must get slapped a lot. And he goes, yeah, but I fuck a lot of women. And that's just what it is.
My father used to tell me this story all the time. He said he used to go out with his buddies to the club, and one of his friends would go up to just random girls and just say the most vile shit in their ear. Like, you want to go home and do this, that, and the other to you. And he would get slapped all the time, but more times than not, he went home with a girl.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll bet you by the end of the night,
right, he was getting laid.
Some chick's going to be like, really? And you're like, got one.
right. So I'm with you 100% on everything.
Did you eventually tell your 12-year-old son that you were in prison?
Yeah.
So that's the story. So
we gotta jump all the way back into it. Sorry.
We're going back.
Segue.
Yeah.
It's fine.
So what happened was, I started scheduling interviews, and I said to myself, well,
he's going to see something.
He's going to see something, right? So I'm sitting down with him, and I said, and it was the day before CBS was coming to my house. And I said, Scotty, I got to talk to you. And I called my ex-wife, and I told her also, because I guess it's a major thing. I don't want to look like a lot. We don't want to all look like liars together. So she was like, all right, talk to him. So I sit down and I say, when Daddy was in Dominican Republic, I wasn't in a resort. I was in jail, and this is what happened. He knows what I do and everything. He knows my events and stuff like that. It was like, whoa. But now, fast forward 2-3 weeks, and I'm doing more interviews and stuff like that. He's the first one to be checking sites, and he's the first one to be screen recording news, and so he's all into it. Like he's super into it. He calls me up. No, I see him when I get off the plane, right? And I get in the car, and he's like, he kind of like taken back. He was like, Dad, you look so much better. I mean, you lost a lot of weight and this, that, and the other. I said, yeah, I know. He said, Dad, you got to keep it off for your health and this, that, and the other. I said, yeah, I'm going to work at it in this, I'm going to go to the gym, and I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to eat right. He goes, well, if you put it back on, you're going to have to go back to the DR. I was like, fuck. I was a little prick. This was before he found out I was in prison. But yeah, so that was the story. But my kids, I'm blessed to have amazing children. Patting myself and my ex-wife on the back, give them, I don't know if you've been married multiple times or just once or whatever it may be.
This is my second marriage, my last marriage.
Through my marriage to my first wife, it became very apparent that we shouldn't be together as far as a husband and wife.
Yeah.
But I would choose nobody in the world to parent my children, to be a co-parent with my children. She's a great mother. She's a great person. Sometimes two people don't belong together.
Yeah.
I mean, she was gorgeous, and she was 19 years old. I was 17, and I liked heavy metal music like she did, so it was awesome, But yeah, so that's that. Yeah. But yeah, but I told him, yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's funny. My ex-wife, she's Puerto Rican. She's the meanest snake. But and you want to talk about somebody who's doing time?
Yeah.
Her new husband.
He's doing time, right?
Wouldn't trade places for anything. I'd rather go back.
I feel your pain, brother.
Prison. That's a tough motherfucker right there. Yeah, she'll, like, if I don't call her like once a week or we don't text or something, she'll call me up one day and I'll answer it, and she'll be like, "What is the problem? What's the problem? You don't text me, you don't call me." I'm like, "God, what? Well, I don't know if you're alive, if you're dead." I'm thinking, like, we're not even co-parents. Our son's like 25 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like, what are you doing? Like, I'm done with you.
I'll tell you a funny story. When I first divorced my first wife, the mother of my kids, she was always, like, even in our relationship, I'm always the most passive one. Like, I'm always the one to make up or kiss ass to kind of get out of the doghouse. That's what, even if I'm right, I'm fine with it. And so I was raised to never yell at a woman or never, never put my hands on her, but never mistreat a woman, no matter how hard she goes at you.
Right.
So she calls me up at the
sometime.
Right. Yeah. So she calls me up one day, and she moved out of the house, and she's actually living with her now husband at this time, and she starts yelling at me for some bullshit, like yelling at the top of her lungs. And I never forget, I'm standing outside, I'm holding my phone. I take the phone away from my ear for a minute, and I look at it, and I pick up the phone. I said, "I could tell you to go fuck yourself now," and I hang up the phone. It was the single greatest liberating moment of my life. Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah. Relationships.
It's something. I'm waiting for wife number 3.
He's still asking. Colby's still asking, ready to ask more questions. Like, what happened to the money and the
We're in the middle of a conversation. We're over that, Dan.
I just got to scan through the CBS report on YouTube. If you could go back and change anything or do anything different, would you?
Yeah. Do you think you? I
wouldn't have signed for the pallet. Number one.
Well, no, but I'm saying like, would you have given better instructions for packaging, or would you have just said that's your problem? But you didn't. Because you just completely don't feel like, oh, I should have been more clear. You just don't feel like I didn't do anything wrong at all. I was just trying to help everybody out. Like,
right.
It never even occurred to me.
But looking back on the whole spectrum of the experience, would I have changed anything? To this day, there was probably a more efficient way to handle the whole thing with, I had 10 lawyers, through the whole story. I've had 10 lawyers.
Right.
I've had, so there was, but my anxiety, obviously, in that situation got, I wanted to get to the finish line before I started. That's where the whole, there were 3 lawyers that said, "I got the deal," like that. And that's where that came in. I could never face the fact until much later that I was going to be here till this was over. You have to trust the process. You have to go through the process. Not necessarily trust it, but go through the process. And I think that's what I would have changed more mentally than what I did, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just throwing shit up against the wall until I got out, or until I could get to a point where I can get out. So I don't know. I think that the whole story would have changed a lot if I thought differently. I'm here. I never really came to that realization until after trial that I'm here. I got to wait this fucking thing out. I was on the phone up until 16 months, I was on the phone. How do I get out sooner than my date?
Yeah.
How do I get to court sooner than my date? How do I get to, you know, how do I strike a deal sooner than when I'm supposed to? You know, so that if I did that, I think I would have been in a much better place mentally. I mean, I spent 18 months crying in my bed, you know, because I missed my kids and because I missed my mom and, you know, and the whole thing. So, you know, I almost had like a full-time job of how the fuck do I get out of here as soon as possible?
Right.
You know, that's what it was. So I think that if I had to change anything, it would be to take a step back before I take 10 steps forward, that type of thing.
I was going to say, after being locked up for so long, like guys would get to prison, they'd show up, and then, you know, let's say me and Pete would sit around, like say right now, a guy named Donovan Davis, who got 17 years for a Ponzi scheme that he really had nothing to do with. And he went to trial because he's like, I didn't do this.
All right.
He lost because
that's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
Right.
He got 17 years, and then he was appealing his case. So when he got to prison, he's in the middle of the appeal, and we're sitting there. I'm sitting there with my buddy Pete, and he's sitting there telling us about his appeal and how he's going to win this. He's like, yeah. So this and this. He's like, so I could be out of here in like 6 months. And Pete and I kind of glance at each other, and we're just like, yeah, man, that sounds like we don't want to tell him like, no, you're going to lose your appeal.
Right.
You're going to lose your appeal.
Right.
Well, you know why? Because 98% of 99.99% of everybody loses their appeal.
Right.
And it sounds to me, you know, and you went to trial.
Yeah.
So they feel like you had an opportunity.
Right.
And then when he lost the appeal a year and a half later, and it was like, I'm going to file my 2255 and this, and I can bring up this and this, which I couldn't bring up in the appeal, but now I can bring up this and this and this, and I'm going to win that. And of course, Pete and I.
Sure you are. Sounds great.
Man, that's solid. That's a solid argument there. And we're like,
this guy's fucked.
Yeah, he's fucked. He's like, you walk up, I'm like, what do you think? He's, come on, you know what I think. You know, it's like, and then what's so funny is once Donovan loses all of those,
right,
then it's me, Pete, and Donovan with the next guy going, well, you know, I'm filing a 2255 right now. Like I should get, if all I got to do is get 5 years off, and you know, I could be out of here, you know, in 6 months. And we're all looking at each other. We're like, man, yeah, solid argument. You know, you just realize after seeing it, you know, what's happening. You realize like, no, bro, you're doing 17 years.
That's, you know, I think when you realize what you're facing, or at least what you're doing, it punches you in the face. It really does. Oh, yeah. You know, when I came to the realization where, I mean, 20 years was an option, you know, like what the fuck, you know, my kids are going to be, you know, X years old, like, you know, and that's what really gets you, you know. But, you know, again, when they said 1.5 years, I wanted to go home then, but, you know, I was almost done, you know, and that's and that's the sense of relief. I'll never forget.
It's a hope that gets you through.
Right. I never forget. I'm a big, I don't know if you noticed it, but I'm a flirt. I'm a big flirt. I flirt with waitresses. I flirt with everybody, you know, and so I was in the bus the second day of trial. I was in the bus, and we picked up this beautiful Dominican girl from the prison next door, which was a woman's prison, and I noticed her on the bus to the court, but I didn't want to say it because I wasn't in the mood. I was super fucking anxious. But when I got out of court and it was done and it was established that I was going home, I sat next to her. We were touching each other's legs. We were talking about sex. We were doing the whole thing. But I was relieved. You know, you have a sense of relief. You know, I never forget when I was sitting on the bus. I'll be home for Christmas. It came in my fucking head. Every on the way back to jail, it came in my head. I'll be home for Christmas. I'll be home for Christmas. And even still, when before I gave up on getting out early, I would still say worst case scenario, I'll be home for Christmas. And that's how it was, you know.
Hey, you guys, if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, please share the video. Also, we're going to put all of Mike's links in the description box, which all of his social media links, and his YouTube channel, which he'll have stuff on his YouTube channel by the time this comes out, hopefully. And please consider joining my Patreon or our Patreon. It really does help Colby and I make videos just like this. We also have Patreon exclusive content on Patreon. It really does help. It's $10 a month. Thank you very much for watching.